go through it.
Train station. Are we on? Yes, okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 11th, 2024 meeting of the Town of Newcastle Town Board. The board has been in executive session discussing matters of contracts, advice of counsel, and hirings in certain departments. May I have a motion to adjourn the executive session and open the work session?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we are now in our work session. We are going to start off with our town administrator's quarterly project update.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I tried to make it as legible as possible. I can also go through it as quickly as possible. I'll just try to hit the highlights for you. With regard to FEMA projects that are ongoing in town, our Minkle Dam removal project, phase 2 of a $4 million grant award is being considered by Westchester County to cover the removal and restoration of the dam area. Tectonic presented this project to the town board on May 14th and also to the ERB on May 20th. So this project is moving along really nicely. The other major project that we're working with FEMA about is the pedestrian bridge replacement. So this was the bridge that was damaged in Tropical Storm Isaias. It's along King Street by Douglas. FEMA has awarded a little bit over $1 million in federal funding to the town of Newcastle to rebuild the Quaker Road footbridge. I'm sorry, according to this, it's Hurricane Ida. So we have some other ongoing projects that are in various stages of development. The Byram Lake Road Culvert Replacement Project, we're still waiting on plans from our new engineering firm. Shether Road's slope stabilization and stormwater quality, we're waiting for permits on that. Are turning to water infrastructure projects, the North Bedford Road Pump Station, we have awarded the contract to rebuild the pump station to TAM Enterprises, and council is in the midst of reviewing the required bonds for sufficiency, and then we'll be ready to start. Our trenchless water main, which is the replacement of an aging water main under the Metro North Railroad and Sawmill Parkways, has shown some promising progress just recently. We actually have been able to obtain permits for the highway work. Emergency vehicles for boring work is a first step to design the project. The holdup appeared to be that DOT was seeking to grant us permits for the entire job, and we weren't quite ready for it yet. We're just seeking to take borings, soil samples of the area where we're gonna have to take and excavate, and that will determine the method by which we are able to take and replace the water main. So it's an important project, and we're glad to see that we've had some significant movement on it now. Our water main replacement project on Meadow, Pine Cliff, Ridge, and Alden. Pine Cliff Road, Ridge, and Meadow Legacy Construction has been awarded the bid to replace the old 6-inch unlined water mains with 8-inch ductile iron water mains and new hydrants. This will improve the fire safety and water pressure for the block. The project is expected to take 6 to 7 months. H2M is our full-time inspector on the job. It's currently 30% complete with the water main installation on Pine Cliff and Ridge. We haven't yet started on Meadow. With regard to Alden and Alden, DPW is actually doing the work. We're doing this in-house. We are completing the replacement of the 6-inch unlined water main, again with 8-inch ductile iron pipe. The main is installed, and we've been pressure testing. That was as of June 6th. It passed, so we're waiting for bacterial testing. If we get approval from the health department, we'll be able to put the main in service, and we've got 4 service lines to be connected to the new main. So we're moving along really well on that as well. Our generator, our backup generator is connected, and the rental generator has been returned, which is fabulous news. That was a $30,000 a month rental.
Yeah.
That was not anticipated, not planned, and we're happy to give it back. There is a transfer switch that I believe that we're still waiting on. That job isn't quite complete, but we're really close. The Millwood Water Treatment Plant, the roof replacement has been completed. Installation's complete. We've got a 2-year maintenance bond in place. Excuse me. The generator for the fuel tank replacement at the Millwood Water Treatment Plant as well. The installation was added to the project. It's been tested. And it's not complete, but it is in service. So again, substantial work on that project as well. As the board is aware, we completed the Chapac roof, and what this puts us in a position to do is to do some research about solar installation. Sabrina has done a fabulous job along with the assistance of SAP of securing some significant grants for us to be able to cover the cost of solar installation. She's been working with Sustainable Westchester to create bid documents. We hope to go out to bid for solar and perhaps battery storage as well. That's the good news on that project. Let's see. Why don't we switch over to sidewalks?
We're up to the Chapac with the LED.
The LEDs is a project that we received funding for 2 years ago. We have not done the installation yet. We're hoping it's gonna be done this summer. We're waiting for the facility to go dark before we take and replace the interior lights with LEDs. The dimmable technology has advanced in leaps and bounds, and so our in-house electrician Dan has been waiting for a product that he feels most comfortable with, and he thinks he found it. So we will be procuring those dimmable LED lights for the auditorium, and we're hoping to install them this summer. So we're on track. Let's see. Finishing up with Chapac. Our bid specifications have been finalized, I believe. We have gone out to bid. We've released the bid for the drainage and the parking lot improvements at Chapac. It's going to make a significant difference when we have handicap parking along the side of the building, and it's no longer a construction zone. They're in the midst of raising the loop road, so we're hoping that it's possible that some of the contractors that are currently working on the Toll Brothers project might also be interested in bidding on our job, which would be a great thing, and we'd be able to, use that economy of scale and get some work done. So we're very hopeful that we're coming to the end of the road on the completion of those projects. Let's see, Gedney Park we've completed. Millwood Park. We have installed a new playground with new swings. We are in the midst of completing the RFP for the ADA compliant path. It's scheduled to go out to bid at the end of this month with construction in late mid-August. Again, we were trying very hard not to have our construction interfere with the softball programs scheduled at Millwood, and we've been able to do that. Also, the tennis courts are being resurfaced, and we will be installing a hitting wall at the back of the tennis courts. And we expect that by the end of the month, so we're moving along really nicely with that as well. Chapline, we continue. We have secured that $500,000 grant. Sabrina is in the midst of finishing up a grant application. Do you want to tell the board a little bit about that?
Sure. I don't know that this is on.
It's on.
It's on, okay. The light was not. I am applying for a federal transportation grant for the entire length of the trailway. It's a $15.9 million project. We have divided the project into 3 different phases so that at any time we could apply for monies for on a phase by phase basis with a starting point and an ending point that makes sense for somebody who wants to use the trailway. That's a little bit different than we've done in the past. For this particular grant, the minimum amount for a construction project was 15 million. So rather than apply for a $4 million or a $5 million phase project, we looked at everything and said, you know what, let's go for the whole thing. We are gonna write into the grant, into the project narrative, the desire to, if they don't wanna give us the 15.9, to at least give us something for a phase of the project, given that we have the $500,000. This federal grant is unique in that it's not asking for a specific number of words per a question. It's giving you an outline of what you need to include in a project narrative that has to be between 15 and 20 pages. So it's giving a little more leeway to tell the story, to tell the reason why we want the trailway, which is refreshing in the sense of telling somebody the benefits of this trailway for our community. So that grant application is actually due next week. Working very diligently to make sure all of the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed. There's a resolution that you have before you tonight to help show the support for that.
Sabrina, do you have a sense of what exactly they're looking for
No, I do not.
in a grant, and what
I do
what
not.
kind of projects are they prioritizing? What goals do they,
They ask you to, there's a whole series of criteria. I mean, they give you the point system, they give you the categories that you need to meet. We are pretty strong in almost every category. The one category that time and again across all grant applications that we are not scoring very high in is need. We do not have a huge population that is labeled, that they label as underserved. And that's our biggest challenge.
Is there a match requirement for this grant?
It's an 80-20. So we would need to provide 20% of that match.
Would that include the $500,000?
The $500,000, we have a 50% match for the $500,000.
No, I understand that, but all the 20%.
We could use this federal money to match the state grant,
Not the other way
But
around.
not
No,
the
the
state
other
to
way
grant,
around.
but not the state to grant the Fed.
correct? Oh no, we should be able to do that. We can use, because it's state and federal, you can match state and federal, you can match state and federal, you can't match federal and federal,
Oh, okay,
or state or state.
got it.
So we should be able to match them both, so that 500,000 will be matched with, if we get money for this, and this grant, that 500,000 would go towards our 20% match.
Yeah, but this I know that we don't meet a need requirement the way they describe it, but it ticks off so many boxes in terms
does.
of environmental advantages, getting cars off the road.
Economic advantages,
health,
environmental
economic, there's so
advantages, recreation, I mean, yes, we will score very high in all of those other categories. I cannot score high in that one category that they ask us to score.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Sure.
Okay, next, let's see, believe it or not, with the Millwood sidewalk, we're still waiting approval from New York State DOT on for the land acquisition.
Believe it.
It's just,
Set of
it's
options.
just shocking. If I were to tell you that this is monies that we secured in 2005 for this project, yeah, I wouldn't be lying. We still have to do the proposed sidewalk RFP, West Orchard Road, Gedney Park to North County Trailway. That RFP is on the list of things to do. We have moved along with the proposed 120 sidewalk extension to the south entrance of Wagon Road Camp, as the board is aware. EBRD study, they had a mid-block crossing, which we are confident New York State DOT would not approve. So we asked them to go back and try to keep it all on one side of the road, and we're waiting for that to come off.
I'm sorry, Jill, which one? Which one?
I'm sorry, that's the 120 sidewalk extension.
Oh, the wagon road, okay.
right, to Wagon Road Camp. And as the board is aware, there are some village homes that present some substantial challenges to the construction of a sidewalk along the road. So we'll see. Next is, and I apologize, it for whatever reason it got dropped off this list, but it's the 117 extension to Elm Street in Salem. I have reached out to New York State DOT asking whether or not there'd be any flexibility in their requirement of a 5-foot snow shelf, 5-foot sidewalk, because again, this is an area where we've got village homes and, you know, taking 10 feet of property it makes it an impossible project. And I actually did get some encouraging feedback from New York State DOT. There is a section of sidewalk along the mobile station, 120 into 117, that is severely pitched. It's really settled poorly. And when we brought it to New York State DOT's attention that they really have to replace that sidewalk, they proceeded to tell us, yes, you do. So it will be our responsibility to take and replace that sidewalk, but we're hoping that we might be able to sort of fold the replacement of that sidewalk into the installation of the new sidewalk that we're proposing that goes all the way up to Salem, that would give the residents as far south as Chappaqua Ridge an opportunity to be able to access town through a sidewalk.
And with the old portion that we would replace, would that be meeting that 10-foot?
It wouldn't, it can't,
Okay,
so what we would explain
can
to the
establish
state is that,
that.
you know, this is only a 3-foot sidewalk. You know, it's only got a 1-foot snow shelf, might we be able to just continue it?
Do you know how often there's an exception granted?
I don't.
Not-
Well, not very.
Not very.
but we have a fortuitous
Yeah, I have to tell you, so
Situation here.
DOT is not, sidewalks is inevitably top on the list of what our residents ask for in terms of amenities.
Always.
But as far as liability goes, New York State DOT, it's not top on their list. And I'm confident that the requirement of a 5-foot snow shelf, which gives pedestrians a 5-foot buffer between the lane of traffic and where somebody's walking along the truck route, is there intentionally, not just for the snow shelf storage, but to give you that separation. Because the liability is crazy.
But do they understand that people are currently walking?
They
On
would
the
prefer,
shoulder
but they
distance.
would prefer people not to walk, and when you
You don't
build
wanna
a
encourage
sidewalk, you're inviting them.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's this conflict going on. So although, you know, we try to be very reasonable and rational when we talk to DOT, it's not that they're not listening, it's just that their goals aren't our goals. But we carry on.
Fair
fingers crossed on this one.
Yeah. Okay, it was far more encouraging and in writing than I anticipated, so all good. We've got some DOT projects within the town of Newcastle. We've got some culvert replacements that are heading down the pike for the end of 2025 into 2026. There's gonna be one along 117 Old House Lane. There's also gonna be one along the Sawmill Parkway. We've got a couple of Westchester projects that are coming along as well. The relief sewer for Joan Corwin Way, which is supposedly going out to bid fall of 2024, and there will be construction in 2025. And the extension of the county trunk along 120 and the town's water main replacement. We're still waiting to hear on the grade crossing elimination at the Roaring Brook Road.
Have we
Sawmill
heard
Parkway.
anything or just silence?
No, I have been in touch with Joe Strini. They are working on it, but I don't know where this project falls in their priorities. There was a lot more communication with them earlier on, a little bit less so now, but they're still talking to us, they still take our calls, so I think that's a good thing.
What, can you refresh my memory, was there funding associated with that?
It was not a town project. It was a
Oh.
New York State federal project that did not involve any contribution by the town.
No, I understand, but I thought the federal government was gonna provide funds for the state to do that. Even if it's not our project, I
It was
feel
a
like-
it was an arrangement between New York State
and the federal government.
Is it still in place?
We didn't, that the project wasn't approved.
Got it, okay.
Okay, it was my understanding that the total funding for the program was $100 million and our project was 60. Again, when it comes to need. Yeah. Okay. I did just wanna move on to the SAM grants. So at Amsterdam Park, I'm thrilled to be able to report that we received confirmation of the $250,000 grant from Assemblyman Chris Burdick to install a septic or sewer at Amsterdam, create 2 ADA compliant bathrooms and bless you. And to improve the fields that are there. And we are actively working to take and submit all the paperwork that the state's asking for us. Excuse me. The Millwood Playground tennis courts, we've got a new playground installed. We talked earlier about the tennis courts to be resurfaced, the hitting wall and the ADA compliant. The LED, the train station. This is so weird. I was sure I put in their project and now I don't see it.
Is it the cameras at Chap train station?
That's the one. It's the cameras at Chapel train station. So Assemblyman Burdick has approved monies for cameras at the train station, both for our back parking lot, around the train station and the entrance to Woodburn Avenue to help with police enforcement. I expect to have before the board on the 25th authorization to approve the award of that contract. We've been working with council. It's been a little bit dicey with our procurement policy, but I think we've got it down. And at that point, we will be repainting under the bridge because we will have cameras all over there.
And then the Arts and Culture Committee will go forward from there.
We're very excited.
Very exciting.
It's great.
It's gonna look great. Okay, and I think that's really about all I have. The HVAC conversion at the train station to heat pumps is complete. We thank Senator Harkam for that fabulous project. So instead of an old oil tank and oil burner, we now have clean heat pumps giving heat and air conditioning at the train station.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
It's quite a lot to go through really quickly. Appreciate it. Any
Sorry,
questions?
there's one update, I just wondered if you could
Yep.
address the Annandale engineering study.
Yes, so we presented the back in March, April, we had a presentation actually to Assemblyman Chris Burdick by our engineering assistant town engineer Miguel Gabriel.
This was the
Visibility and sight lines and vegetation and we presented it to them. So we reviewed it with Assemblyman Burdick. He had some terrific feedback for us. We submitted it to New York State DOT along with a cover letter indicating Assemblyman Burdick's support, asking them to take a look at the sightline deficiencies and having a number of suggestions for them, including cutting back of vegetation on the north side of 117 and Annandale corner. And the state came back to us basically saying that because of the lack of incidents of accidents at that intersection, that it didn't meet the warrants for road correction, but that they would take a look at the vegetation and see whether or not there was anything that they might be able to do. That vegetation is all on private property, which is part of the problem.
Got it.
We would have been happy with them writing a strong letter to the owners suggesting that they cut the vegetation back or asking, but
That is a tricky intersection when you're trying to go south.
it's a very tricky intersection and if you took a look at the study, it wouldn't surprise you at all to learn that the sight distances, both looking left and right, are well deficient from what the law requires today. That intersection never would have been built today.
Thank you.
we were disappointed, we weren't really surprised, but we were disappointed, we put a lot of work into it.
Okay, thank you, Jill.
Move on to Sabrina and review the Maris poll proposal.
Okay, Sabrina, do you wanna start us
Sure.
off?
Sure, prior to the envision process that we have just completed, the town board entertained a couple proposals from surveying companies. It was always the intent that the information gathered through the envision process would be helpful in creating a survey that would be mailed to every property owner in the community. Maris Poll was the preferred consultant or preferred proposal after you interviewed them, and they have come back with a revised proposal because it was approximately a year ago that you talked to them. The revised proposal includes some of all of the same elements as previously discussed, where a survey would be developed over several weeks in working with the town board. Would take some of the information, the emphasis that was made during the envision process and turn that into survey questions. The town board would be involved with finalizing those survey questions, and then Maris Poll would send surveys to every property owner. The proposal includes two different mailings. One is the actual survey itself, the other is a postcard reminder for people to respond to the survey. The response to the survey can be done online, it can be done in paper, or it can be done via phone. So there's many opportunities for anybody to get involved, but it is going to be based on property ownership or people who live in the community.
Okay, so for anyone who has not been following this project, we had a very extensive engagement session project with Pace Land Use University and Nexus Design. We had on the 23 acres of town-owned property surrounding the Chappaqua train station, we had in-person engagement sessions, we had a tour, we had a dedicated website that allowed people to do virtual tours and give ample feedback online. We had dedicated sessions with the senior community at the senior center, with Rotary, with the Chamber of Commerce. We are having the CCSD come and take tours and give feedback tomorrow. In fact, we're giving them 2 sessions to do that. And we've had robust engagement and participation. We had a lot of feedback, and we're taking that feedback and we're going to have Maris create a survey to then reach every single resident in town with that survey, using different modalities.
Yep.
Online, mailing, on the website, people will receive a mailing. They'll have the opportunity to go to a website based on the information on the mailing. They'll have the opportunity to make a phone call, to send replies by mail. So you could do it virtually, online, by post office mail, through a website. So I think that we're making every effort to reach everyone and get a really broad range of feedback from everyone.
What I
Are there
really,
any modalities that I missed? I mean,
no, I was just gonna
Right.
comment.
okay, go ahead.
What I really like about the approach here is that we've spent a lot of time getting qualitative input from the folks that were able to come out and engage with us, and this next step will really allow us to take that and turn it into a statistically significant qualitative set of data to really consider if and how we wanna move forward. So I very much like this approach.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it's definitely using one of the best survey companies, and like you said, it is statistically relevant. Any other questions on this? No? Okay. Sounds good, yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Sure.
yes, okay, so next, we're gonna be talking about electric vehicle charging stations with INF Associates.
So great that Sabrina's here, cause she can tag team with me.
Yeah.
So what we realized is that we have a number of locations in town that either have a single port, like Amsterdam property, Gidney, and actually Allen Place, where we have an opportunity to take and expand our charging capabilities. Amsterdam in particular is very intriguing to us because it's the only charging stations on that side of town. And when you think about the number of families that come and play soccer there, the fact that we're able to extend this amenity to our residents and also neighboring communities is a terrific thing. Same with Gedney. Gedney gets a tremendous amount of use. We only have one charging station there, so we'd like to be able to expand it. And Sabrina, sorry, just refresh my
okay.
recollection on
Allen Place.
on Allen Place.
So-
That go ahead. That
Yeah,
seems to be
so-
our problem.
So just to kind of flesh this out a little bit, Westchester County entered into an agreement with INF Associates. They are able to offer a program where EV charging stations would be no cost to the town. Okay, that's very important. The charging stations that are part of this agreement are the latest and greatest level 2 chargers. There's a 5-year maintenance agreement at no cost to the town, and that's very important. Being the person that gets copied on all of the charging stations when there's problems, it's important that we have a company that we can rely on to fix them. We provided 3 different locations for INF Associates to look at to determine whether or not they could provide no cost for EV charging stations. In Amsterdam Park, they looked at the provision of 2 dual ports at no cost to the town. At Gedney Park, there is currently 1 charging station there that is not operational. They will remove that charging station and provide 2 dual ports and 1 single port for a total of 5 ports at no cost to the town. We looked at King Street or in the Allen Place parking lot. There is 1 charging station there that it currently is not operational. It was a little bit difficult because that is a limited number of spaces in that parking lot. So they gave us 2 different options. Both options do cost the town in this instance because we are not providing enough new chargers to balance out the cost of replacing the existing charger. They said that if we were to install 2 dual port charging stations for a total of 4 ports, the proposal would result in a $6,902 cost to the town. So that's taking up 4 spaces in that parking lot. The second proposal they provided was the installation of 3 dual ports, a total of 6 ports, at a cost of $1,673 to the town.
And what about the maintenance?
5-year maintenance. So they're all the same level 2 charging station, level 2 chargers with a 5-year maintenance. The question before you, one is, do you support the proposals for Amsterdam and Gedney, and authorize the supervisor to sign those proposals as proposed? The second question is, do you wanna install the chargers at Allen Place? And if so, do you prefer option 1 at $6,900, $6,902?
How many
Or,
spaces was that again?
What?
How many spaces? How many ports?
That was installation of 2 dual port chargers, 4 different ports, which would be 4 spaces.
So you have to be charging. So
Right.
it means that if you don't have
Taking it
electric,
away.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what's the other?
The other one was 3 dual ports, total of 3 with 6
spaces,
Ports.
right.
6 spaces, and that was $1,673.
The problem is that 6 spaces is a lot of spaces for that little parking lot.
So
And so that's what sort of gave us pause.
And
There's one.
particularly given that there are EV chargers in the train station lot.
right.
Yeah, but they're not.
Those are usually used during, aren't they, during the day, they're
Yeah, and you have to have a commuter permit in
Yeah.
order to use them, so it's not the same population that's using it, so
And what about the ones at Bell, near the Bell School?
so
There's
those are the
that
ones that are in back of is there in the
Near
South
the
Greeley
Bank of
parking
America.
lot?
stores.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
those-
they're open to anybody,
Yeah.
we've just installed them last year.
When
How many are there?
At least two
There's two ports.
dual ports, so four spots.
when you
I
say
mean,
that
could
they
we
have
offer, I'm sorry, 1 second, could we offer more in that area? I mean, I know that it's not exactly Allen Place and people are not used to walking, they wanna drive to exactly where they're going, but
I
that's
think
still,
they would
Both
have
of
to be
those
still in
parking
town.
lots, both of those parking lots are limited.
They're equally limited.
They're equally limited and the opportunity with the no cost or low cost was to replace the currently non-operational charger.
the requirement that someone is charging while they're parked there, that is our requirement, that is county.
No, that's
No,
your
that's ours.
requirement.
We currently enforce that how?
Yes.
Tickets.
Tickets.
I mean, could we do something like if we had the 6 spaces allow like 15-minute or 30-minute parking for a non-EV?
We can't enforce it.
Okay.
That's the problem. So we either require people to charge or we don't require people to charge. And if you're not gonna require people to charge, then we shouldn't have chargers because people are just gonna,
Park there.
park there. Monopolize a spot and people with chargers.
And you could also, a third option is to not do anything about that parking lot right now.
6 just seems
That's what I'm thinking.
excessive
Right,
because of its use, not that it's not a good idea, it just seems that it's too
And-
many
Agree.
Yeah,
yeah.
obviously.
And this is
it's-
what we stumbled
for that
all
size
over.
parking lot.
That's why you have a choice on that one.
Yeah, that's why we separated it out. If everything was no cost, we wouldn't have put it as a discussion item.
How much does the installation of a dual port charger cost if we weren't part of this program?
Oh, it's much more expensive.
30,000 or something like
Yeah, it's ridiculously.
Okay. So there is still quite a bit of benefit if we were to take up
Yes.
the two.
Yes, there is an advantage, a cost savings for the town under either scenario. And right now, that charging station is not operational and it's not under a warranty.
Do we have to decide today about Allen
You don't
Place?
need to decide about that one, I would encourage you to decide to if you're interested in Amsterdam and Gedney, to
I
approve
think those are easy
today.
ones. I mean, I
Yeah.
hope everyone agrees with that,
bec-
but
and only because once the town board signs off on the proposals, they go back to INF Associates and then they get put into the lineup at Westchester County. And it may be some time, cause this is processing between the INF Associates, the consultant, and Westchester County.
well, I don't wanna say no right off the bat, but I would like to take some time to consider a third proposal.
Yeah,
Well, you
so-
and you have both proposals in your packet.
Right, so can we I would prefer that the board approve the Gedney and Amsterdam tonight so we can get in the queue.
I'm
Yes.
comfortable with that.
I am
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I would prefer that too.
Be nice to have.
How is it in our,
Parks.
We'll make sure
Do we
it's
need to amend the
appropriate in our resolutions, okay. So if with the board's permission, I'll quickly go through the administrative items. Okay, we've got payment of claims, we've got authorization to settle the 2018 to 2023 tax certiorari proceeding on matter of Jacobson. We've got authorization to solicit bids for water maintenance materials, these are for non-extended contract items. We've got authorization to approve a formal letter of permission for restoration of the Hetty graveyard, this is Gray Williams's request to us. Authorization to release the letter of credit for Sunshine Children's Home, and we'll be accepting a cash bond agreement in its place. We've got authorization to support the submission of the grant application that Sabrina spoke to you earlier about. And a resolution authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding relating to the Community Choice Aggregation Program. And that's all I have for the work session.
you.
Thank you.
So may I have a motion to close the work session and open up our town board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we're officially beginning our town board meeting. Let's see, any announcements, Jill?
No, I have a couple of just housekeeping items that we're
Go ahead.
on. Yeah, we're on summer hours, which means that on through Labor Day, we close at 3:15 on Fridays. We will be closed on next Wednesday, June 19th. Our recycling center will be closed as well. However, Sanipro's collection for refuse and recycling will be unchanged. So Sanipro is collecting as usual, it's just that our recycling center will be closed. We don't have a meeting next week because it's grievance day and so we don't have a room to meet in, so we're taking advantage of that. Our parking permit system, our new one, we expect to roll out on July 1. We wanna thank everybody for their patience while we try this new technology, and we really wanna thank Christina Papes for dragging us into the 21st century. It's about time we upgraded our parking, so this is
you,
gonna be a
Stay
great
for
thing.
right now, but it'll be better. Thank you for your patience.
Alright, so I'm gonna give hopefully a brief supervisor's report. I did wanna talk about the closing out of Envision, but we discussed that amply already. We had a wonderful pride flag raising ceremony on June 1st. Was well attended and very nice as usual, and I want to let people know that we're having a gun violence awareness rally this Friday. This is June, is Gun Violence Awareness Month, and you can see we're all wearing orange. We'll be taking a picture, but we're having this event on Friday, this Friday the 14th at 7 p.m. at the gazebo. It's going to be right after the Horace Greeley Senior Car Parade in town. So hope you could come to both. I just wanna talk very briefly about our community for a bit. I've talked a lot, starting in January, at the beginning of my tenure, about bringing about a better sense of unity to our town. There are three things I wanna talk about. One is the very recent past, one is the present, and one is going to be in the future. So in the recent past, on Sunday, we had a really powerful event on June 9th. It started at 4 in the morning, between 4 and 6 a.m. in the morning. This was what we're calling a Break the Hold Into the Light Sunrise Walk. Break the Hold is a foundation that is based in Pleasantville, and it was started by a family following the loss of their son by suicide. Pleasantville has had a walk like this for 6 years and they get about 700 people. It's very meaningful. So someone came to me to do a sister walk in solidarity in Newcastle. I thought this was a really important thing to do, and we had our inaugural walk this Sunday. In the wee hours of the morning, we had 100 people show up. It was a truly powerful moment. And I want to thank especially Akiko Roy, who came to me with this idea and gathered her friends together and put this together very quickly. I also want to thank those who helped her, Susan Jalinas, Beatrice Halleck, Sue McShane, Stacy Science, and Michelle Turenchuk. This was about mental health awareness, education, and suicide prevention. And it really revealed a great need in our town, so we came together in solidarity. And as your town supervisor, one of the most important issues to me has been to build a sense of community and bring people together. Having a more compassionate and unified community is really important. I think that things have devolved, especially with social media. On Facebook, people go at each other in very harsh ways, and I think that we have to sort of reclaim our social spaces, come out of social media and come together in person in town. So I talked about the immediate past, something we will be doing today that I think is an important and powerful thing, and maybe somewhat controversial. We're going to be seating a committee on inclusion and belonging. again, to build a sense of community in our town. This is a committee that will take a stand against all form of hatred and hate speech and discrimination toward anyone or any group. I wanna touch a little bit on the fact that geopolitical issues have been on everyone's mind in town. And there are a lot of issues that we cannot resolve, but we want to recognize that we respect and care for one another in this community as families and friends and neighbors, despite our differences. And we know that when we all come together, there's a lot of peace and goodwill that exists here. So we are appointing people on this committee who want to make this a reality and bring us to a more peaceful place. So I'm asking everyone very loudly and clearly to support these efforts. We've had a lot of controversy on these committees. We had a committee on race and equity, we had a committee on race, equity and inclusion. And these things tend to end with a lot of controversy. So I'm asking people to be more supportive, to be more kind, to be more open, and if there are things you disagree on, to be more curious and ask questions in a more open way. So we will be seating people who seem to be on opposite sides of issues. And again, this may seem controversial, but these are people who have said that they want to work together. And when we see that happen, it's time to really sit up and listen and not allow ourselves to remain into our known and comfortable echo chambers. It's really time to open up and reach out and find the courage to come together. So I'm asking people to support these very courageous, thoughtful, and generous people who are willing to do this work. We'll be appointing them later. So you'll be hearing more about this as time goes along. And the something to look forward to into the future, the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee has an initiative that is Get to Know Your Neighbor's Bench. This is more of a work in progress. They're thinking of setting up a bench at the farmers market. This should happen in the fall in a very casual way, to sort of invite people. I suppose they'll have someone sit at the bench, and it's an invitation for people who are just around to come and sit down and have a conversation with someone that you don't know. Get to know your neighbor in person. So they're going to begin this in the fall, and you will learn more about it. We'll get more information. But this is something that can happen in the fall, spring, summer, and fall. And they're thinking of a different format for the winter. But I think it sounds pretty interesting. So you'll be hearing more about this Get to Know Your Neighbor's Bench. And that's all I have for my supervisor's report. Okay. And with that, we have a few proclamations for today, and I want to read. We have an Arbor Day proclamation, which is retroactive. We should have done it last month. We will have a gun violence awareness proclamation, a Pride Month proclamation, and a National Caribbean American Heritage Month proclamation. With the Heritage Month proclamations, we had committed to do all the ones that are recognized by the federal government. Last month, we recognized Jewish American Heritage Month and Asian American, Native Pacific, and Native Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So this month will be National Caribbean Heritage Month. So we have 4 proclamations to read, and I'm going to ask all of you to take one of them and read them. So Holly, if you would like to take the Arbor Day proclamation, we would appreciate that.
Where is it? I don't see it in the packet.
They are
85.
in the packet. I can pass it along if
Yeah,
it's easier.
sorry, I
Here
already
you go.
Yes.
Okay,
Have it?
I'll read Arbor Day.
Which one, Arbor Day? Don't have it. Sorry. No, I don't have Arbor Day.
It's on page 85.
Oh.
85.
Here it is.
Oh, okay, that's thank you.
beat me to it.
Sorry, Jill.
Go ahead. Okay.
Whereas Arbor Day was first observed in 1872 with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed through the nation and the world, and whereas 2024 is the 152nd anniversary of National Arbor Day, whereas trees are a renewable resource and help to reduce erosion, moderate temperature, lower heating and cooling costs, clean the air, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees in Newcastle increase property value, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees wherever they are planted are a source of joy and renewal. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board in Newcastle retroactively proclaims Friday, April 26, 2024 as 2024's Arbor Day in the town of Newcastle. Be it further resolved that the town board urges all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day, to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and to plant and care for trees in furtherance of happiness and well-being of this and future generations. And I think we can make every day Arbor Day.
Exactly, thank you,
Second.
Holly. Okay, it is
Oh, we're not
retroactive, we missed it, but we thought it was nevertheless important to state our commitment to this. Okay, now we have, June is Gun Violence Awareness Month, and we have a proclamation for that.
Whereas every day dozens of Americans are killed by gun violence, leaving countless friends, family members, and loved ones heartbroken and traumatized, and entire communities living in fear of experiencing or witnessing gun violence. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to die by gun homicide than people in other developed countries. And whereas in 2024 alone, there have been more mass shootings than days in the year, with more than 190 mass shootings so far that have killed hundreds of people and injured even more, according to the Gun Violence Archive. And whereas gun violence has serious implications for victims, survivors, and their communities, and includes but is not limited to gun suicides, gun homicides, domestic violence involving a firearm, officer-involved shootings, and unintentional shootings. And whereas cities and towns across the nation, including the town of Newcastle, New York, are working to end senseless gun violence. And whereas protecting public safety in the communities we serve is the town board's highest responsibility. And whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories. And whereas National Gun Violence Awareness Day is commemorated on the first Friday of June this year, on June 7th, which honors the memory of Medea Pendleton, who at age 15 in 2013 was tragically shot and killed in broad daylight 1 week after performing at President Obama's second inauguration. Hadia's friends asked people to wear orange, a symbol of human life, in remembrance of all victims and survivors of gun violence. And whereas throughout the entire month of June, nationally recognized as Gun Violence Awareness Month, we are asked to renew our commitment to end gun violence, vowing to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our children, families, and communities safe. Now therefore be it resolved that the members of the town board of the town of Newcastle do hereby proclaim the month of June 2024 as Gun Violence Awareness Month in the town of Newcastle, and urge residents to support their community's efforts to prevent the tragic events of gun violence to foster a secure environment for all.
Okay, thank you, Ally.
Pride Month proclamation, whereas the town of Newcastle, New York upholds the value of dignity of each person and champions the rights, freedoms, and equality of all individuals and families. And whereas all are welcome in the town of Newcastle to live, work, play, and deserve to feel a sense of belonging, inclusion, and equality, and a place to call home where they are safe, happy, and supported by friends and neighbors. And whereas the town denounces prejudice and unfair discrimination based on age, gender identity, gender expression, race, color, ethnicity, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, ability, socioeconomic status, or physical attributes as an affront to our fundamental principles. And whereas Pride Month commemorates the Stonewall Uprising in New York City, which took place in June of 1969, when lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, plus, and allied friends took a stand for human rights and dignity and fought against police harassment and discriminatory laws that have since been declared unconstitutional. And whereas LGBTQ plus people have fought for equal treatment, dignity, and respect, and have achieved significant milestones ensuring that future generations of LGBTQ plus people will enjoy a more equal and just society. And whereas LGBTQ plus people still face disparities in employment, healthcare, education, housing, and many other areas central to the pursuits of happiness in the United States. And whereas the town of Newcastle recognizes the valuable cultural, civic, and economic contributions of the LGBTQ plus community which strengthen our social welfare. And whereas it is imperative that young people in our community, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers and community leaders. And whereas, despite being marginalized, LGBTQ plus people continue to celebrate authenticity, acceptance, and whereas the town of Newcastle reaffirms its commitment to standing in solidarity with LGBTQ plus individuals and families in their ongoing struggle against discrimination and injustice. Now, therefore be resolved that the members of the town declare the month of June 2024 as LGBTQ plus Pride Month in the town of Newcastle and urge residents to recognize the contributions made by members of the LGBTQ plus community and to and to actively promote the principles of equality, liberty, and justice.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Jen, go.
National Caribbean American Heritage Month, June 2024. Whereas National Caribbean American Month is celebrated every June to honor and recognize America's rich and diverse cultures, which includes the Caribbean American population. And whereas during National Caribbean American Heritage Month, we celebrate the contributions of the millions of people across our nation with Caribbean heritage who believe in our nation's most sacred values of opportunity and freedom. And whereas in June 2005, the House of Representatives unanimously adopted H-Con Res 71, sponsored by Congresswoman Barbara Lee, recognizing the significance of Caribbean people and their descendants in the history and culture of the United States. And on February 14, 2006, the resolution similarly passed the Senate, culminating a 2-year bipartisan and bicameral effort. And the proclamation was issued by President George W. Bush on June 6, 2006. And whereas we celebrate the achievements and dreams of the millions of people of Caribbean origin now living in the United States, while honoring the shared history of joy and perseverance that has united and enriched life across our region for centuries. And whereas we recognize that there is no single Caribbean American identity, and that the mix of cultures, languages, and religions live across the United States and the islands reflects the diversity of spirit that defines the American story. And whereas Caribbean Americans have played pivotal roles in American history, figures such as Alexander Hamilton, who was born in Nevis, and Jean-Baptiste Juan du Sable, a Haitian recognized as a founder of the city of Chicago, are just a few examples. Today, Caribbean Americans continue to excel in various fields, including arts, politics, sports, and academia. And whereas from the Caribbean Americans who helped build our country from the ground up to those who have only just arrived, they have all believed in the possibilities our country has to offer and strengthened the diverse fabric of our nation. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the town board of the town of Newcastle hereby declares and proclaims the month of June as Caribbean American Heritage Month in the town of Newcastle in the state of New York.
Thank you, Jen. That was a lot of proclamations for this month. I wanna say that the National American Heritage Months, the proclamations will be said just one time, and now we've established those months in Newcastle. So in the future, we can celebrate them, but we don't have to read the proclamations every year. Okay, just wanna say that. Okay, thank you, everyone, and now we have come to our public comment. This is not the public hearing yet. We're having a public hearing after public comment on the Indian Brook Croton Gorge Watershed Protection Overlay District. This is public comment for topics other than that. So anyone in the audience, please come up, and then we'll take people online. Hello, even though we know you, state your name.
Hello, wonderful people.
Hello, you still have to state your name and where you live.
No, I will.
Even
My
though we
name
know.
is John Ehrlich, H-R-L-I-C-H, and I am privileged to live in this town for 25 years. So I thank you so much for all you do, and that's really the essence of most of my comment today. Imagine to be in a town which does so much, gets it done under budget or in budget, according to the budget, that can execute just the myriad numbers of projects that you discussed today. I'm not gonna repeat them all because it's just such a lengthy list that you deserve an enormous amount of credit. And I hope the entire town just says thank you, because totally amazing. And the people that are sitting here, to some extent there, people in the back, people over here, are the ones that get it done. You would think that they're miracle workers, but they just work well for the town and for the individuals. So for all of this, I wanna thank this person over here has got a lot doing. And deserves an enormous amount of credit. So I wanna say thank you just for all of the completed projects and other things. So I do appreciate that. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is as thank yous is to our area organizations that have accomplished so much for so many. And as a Mount Kisco Rotary member and so forth and so on, we have always invited them to speak, and we will continue to do that. Neighbors Link and every one of these I have also personally contributed to because they help, because they help, and it's not just picking up people who are sleeping in the fields, but so much of what they're doing in translations and welcoming them, it's all about. Another one that folks may or may not be aware of, the Community Center of Northern Westchester. I'm sorry I can't, put these, I will be glad to distribute anything just for anybody so that they know. So I really want to thank you. Next, my next point is a question. Can we and how can we, in order to keep these projects going? We all know about the Chappaqua Performing Arts Center, CHAPAC. They do a great job. You fund them in so many ways, but also individuals can fund them. So what I would like to ask, is there a way that we can set up not-for-profits to help cover the costs, in a sense like CHAPAC, but without getting the town involved so that they have to do it. So one can make private contributions to these, as I can contribute to Neighbors Link, as I can contribute to these other organizations. Let us see, perhaps think about how to create NFPs for the town projects to do it. It could be something as simple as the train station resurrection fund or something like that. It could be as simple as the sidewalks for everyone project. And I don't want to go through all of those things that you talked about, but the Parks and Recreation obviously have done a lot as participatory. So I would like to put that for your consideration and to see if it's worthwhile for the town board to get involved with. I very much would like to do it, and I would certainly personally support any effort to do that. I know it's been a while since I've been here, but I've got to bring this one up because it affects everybody in town. Power supply. I know Con Edison, their first name is Con, and they're not X, they're just Con. But boy, oh boy, those power bills are really impossible to understand. And so I have a couple of questions related to town board's involvement in power supply. One, we know we have one alternative supplier, major one, for power. Do we have anything else? One that is not, is there any competition for Con Edison to supply power to us? And I know the wiring is substantial. There's much there. I'm not gonna blame Thomas Edison, he did a good job. But we have to move forward from that. So I would like to put that out there as a question, is that what can we do to moderate our power costs for town of Newcastle residents? And I wanna thank you so much, and I also want to ask the town board, is there any way to request and secure rate and power cost reductions? If so, how? So with that said, I've talked a long time. I just wanted to express my appreciation to all of you who do so much, and you all, and any way that we as residents can help. And just to resurrect another point that I brought up earlier today, I would like to help create a way of telling this entire town how much you do, what you've gotten done. I have gotten so many requests. People ask me, of all people, well, what's the town doing about this? How can we do this? What did they achieve on this? You've got such a great story. And this guy helps, getting things out, but I think we can get it out in more detail. So what can we do to publicize all the wonderful things that the town departments are doing? And with that, let's think about it. I'm here to help. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for your very thoughtful suggestions and questions. We'll take all of that into consideration. Thank you. Anyone else from the audience on anything other than the public hearing topic?
I know you know me,
Hello,
Nicole
Nicole.
Richey.
Tell us who you are.
And John, I don't know how long you said you had the privilege of living here, but I have the privilege of living here in Newcastle since 1949.
That beats me by a lot.
I think the bench, get to know your neighbor, is a great idea. I was listening to the work session on Zoom, so I didn't hear clearly what the decision, if a decision had been made about the EV chargers for Gedney and Amsterdam. If you put that on hold, I couldn't hear well.
We're going to go forward with those and we're putting the Allen Place on hold.
Oh, okay, great. And the other piece of it that I didn't hear was if they're gonna be marked for EV charging only. They are,
Yes.
okay. Cause I passed by Millwood Park on my way over here where there are two clearly marked spots, stencils on the parking spaces. And one person is charging their car and the other person is not. It's very frustrating.
Enforcement
And of
is
course,
an issue.
I know enforcement's the big issue, but at least if they're stenciled and marked, then if an officer does happen to go by, there's a recourse. Great, thanks, I applaud that.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience? Yes?
Hi.
Nice to see all of you. I only know Jeremy. Nice to see you again. Cynthia Manichurian, 100 Glendale Road. We will be talking about the overlay, and this has been asked of the town board before. The residents of the West End have an Ossining mailing address, and if we're going to focus so much on the West End and the overlay and so forth, it's been asked before whether the town can look into changing our address to Newcastle, because as a community, we are part of Newcastle and it's very confusing on the West End. I know there's a procedure to go through, but we'd like you to consider it. I'd like you to consider how to go through that.
We've heard that.
Yes, I know.
Heard that before. I've heard different opinions on that. Some people I heard were upset about the
Could
suggestion.
you have a public hearing or a few on that before moving forward?
I think it would be great to hear from people, to hear what they would
Or
like.
even a polling of the West End for how they feel about it?
But no one in town has a Newcastle PO address. It's either Chappaqua, Millwood, and the other surrounding towns in surrounding POs in Newcastle, Austining, Yorktown, Bedford, and Armagh.
Right, but we're not
So I just wonder what your thoughts are anyhow, or if you haven't really thought about it, that's okay too. But I don't think the PO would be Newcastle.
Well, we're not
What do you
Austining,
consider?
so
So it's Austining now for you?
I don't know what that correct title would be.
Yeah.
We belong to Newcastle, Millward belongs to Newcastle, Chappaqua belongs to Newcastle, so
Right.
something that connects us.
Yeah, so
To
that would
write
mean that
down.
everybody's address would have to change. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think it would be great to be more connected and identified, but so many considerations,
Right.
so many opinions, and
It'd be great
yeah,
to
the
have
lines have
structured
been
review.
drawn from the beginning of time. This way, school districts are drawn in different jurisdictions, or the Chappaqua School District has people in the town of Mount Pleasant. I mean, the jurisdictions are very tangled. But I hear what you would like to try to do, and I can totally understand it. I'm just afraid that there are so many complications once you start to really think about it.
They have no control.
There's complication everywhere.
So I think
And to some extent, there are things that we don't control as well.
I think a lot of this may actually originate from the Postal Service.
Yes.
And I know that somewhere I lived previously, they were able to petition to the Postal Service to get an alternate title
Yes.
granted. So you could have it delivered to either the town name or the sub-region that they had defined. So
Because
it's
honestly, if
some
somebody,
questions, I think.
if
But you know what
somebody
that would
write-
do? Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
That would confuse things even further because you could have neighbors with two different addresses. You could have someone with Austining and your neighbor might choose to have Newcastle. And it would, it would create, I think, further
If you
confusion.
write a letter to me and you give my address, but Newcastle, New York, and the same zip code, it arrives,
Okay,
so. Cause the post office knows.
something
Thank
to
you.
think about, but
Thank you.
thank you for suggesting. Yes.
Hello, I'm David Valdez. I live on Glendale Road. On the topic of addresses, I would just like to offer the following. Number one, addresses reside in the power of the community. The post office does not grant or give addresses. If a developer develops a new subdivision, the town names the street and gives the addresses. The post office does not do that. So it is, right now, we have a designated Austining address. I will tell you, as a resident of Newcastle, when I tell people that I live in Newcastle and then they ask for my address, whether it's at a store or anything else, and I say, oh, you live in Austining. No, I don't live in Austining. We live in Newcastle. It's very confusing. So one thing that I want to throw out at this meeting, why don't you rename all the Austining addresses that are in Newcastle Chappaqua Hills? Because it would allow the community and the leadership here to remember that we're part of Chappaqua and
You did
part
write
of
to us about
Newcastle.
this.
I did, and I outlined how the rules work, and I gave you the link to the Postal Service, who says it is with you 5 people can change our address at a vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, so hang on a second. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to make a general public comment? Yes, we have one more.
My daughter, she wants to ask you something.
Oh, yes, what would you like to ask?
She's
I see her, but I take people in who are here in person first.
Yeah.
And I will get to her. Anyone else in the audience?
Because I am having the same situation, I mean, I have all addresses for Austining. and I am paying taxes to here.
Would you like to come up to the microphone?
Yeah,
If,
the
okay.
same problem.
We have Yolanda Zanin online. Please unmute yourself and you can make your comment. Just please identify yourself and where and
Yes,
where
hi.
you live and
Yes, I'm Nancy Jane, my mom is there, Yolanda Zinin, 20 Alapartis Road. And I just wanna also echo the same concerns that the previous people were saying in regards to changing the address. I mean, our taxes are very high, so I wanna also understand the impact that this would have on our taxes, and then absolutely, if we can change the address, I would like that as well.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Joanne, please I don't see a hand raised, but I see Joanne Larry, would you like to make a comment?
I'm not speaking comments on this, I'm speaking comments on the overlay that I, if I understand
Okay.
correctly, coming in the next session.
Correct, you're correct. Okay, thank you. Anyone else for general public comment? No? Okay, so we are now going to open the public hearing. May I have a motion to, let's see this correctly, to open the public hearing on the Indian Brook Croton Gorge Watershed Protection Overlay District law?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so let's see, before we take public comment.
We have I have index cards back there if anyone wishes to speak, if they could take an index card with their name on it, and then so we can keep track of it.
Okay, did everyone hear that? Please, everyone wishing to speak, please write your name on the index card, your name and address, and bring it up here to the table to Christina and she'll pass it to us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sabrina, do you wanna start us off with?
There's also I just wanna note there's also a handout on the table of a chart you may be interested in.
Okay, did everyone hear that? There's a chart there, please take the chart to refer to it. You may be interested in looking at the chart as we have an initial discussion. You know, I didn't see the chart myself. Is it in the packet?
Jill had it, I don't know if she sent it to me.
I was looking. You don't have it.
Jill, did you
Jill,
send
you know,
the town
we
board
don't have the chart. We don't have it.
You're probably
I thought it was in the packet.
I thought it was too.
I didn't see it, yeah.
I have it in my email. Yeah,
Is it? Okay.
yeah, but it's not in the agenda, it's separate.
No.
No. Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It should be page 97 of the packet.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay.
There it is, page 97.
Yeah,
Thanks,
sorry,
Lauren.
Jill, yes.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, Sabrina, do you wanna start us off with?
Sure, so tonight I'm gonna talk to you about the Indian Brook Croton Gorge Intermunicipal Watershed Protection Overlay Protection Zone or Overlay District. Just to start, this area covers portions of 5 municipalities. The town of Portland, the town of Newcastle, both the town and the village of Ossining, as well as the village of Croton-on-Hudson. So the town of Newcastle, along with the town of Portland, sit at the headwater, what's called the headwater area of this watershed. In 2007, 2008, Westchester County, with funding from the state, worked with the 5 municipalities to create what was known back then as the Indian Brook Croton Gorge Watershed Conservation Action Plan. There were 5 goals of that plan. Protect and restore natural resources, they're listed on the screen. Develop and implement stormwater management practices that will protect water quality or improve water quality. Promote sustainable development throughout the watershed through land use regulations and environmental regulations. Preserve and protect fish, wildlife, and significant habitat, and educate the public. These were the 5 action strategies. All of the municipalities in this watershed at that time adopted this plan. It was part of their impetus to implement the plan through local land use regulations and at that time educate the public. To just kind of give a sense of what the land area in Newcastle looks like, in the Indian Brook watershed, it is completely single-family residentially zoned. It is our 2-acre zoning district, which is our largest residential zoning district. Because it is zoned 2 acres does not mean that every property is 2 acres. It means that you may have 14 acres, but your zoning is 2-acre zoning. We, sitting at the headwaters, have single-family land use unless the town, any of the town boards, the planning board, the town board, or the zoning board has issued what is known as a special use permit. We have one property in this, I don't know if it's in this watershed, the Sunshine Children's Home, which is a special use permit. The impetus to create the overlay protection zone came directly from that conservation action plan. It was really spearheaded by the town of Cortland, who contacted the remaining 4 municipalities because the intention was to try and create a single level of protection throughout all of the different municipal entities in this watershed. Newcastle was the only municipality that had a higher level of protection as compared to the other municipalities. So it was very, Newcastle was seen as the model. We for example, have a 150-foot wetland buffer right now today in our wetland or environmental overlay zone. Every other municipality was brought up to our standard. So a lot of the components of this legislation reflect our existing code. The applicability of this legislation is all new land use, construction, or subdivision within the watershed. If you have a house and a yard, a shed, you can still have your house, your yard, your shed, no matter where it is on your property. This is not intended to make something non-conforming or to make you tear it down, or restrict you from making repairs. I'm gonna go through a summary of some of the requirements and how they compare to Newcastle's requirements. The information I'm presenting in this slideshow is also contained in the chart that I asked you to pick up in the back of the room and the chart that you have in your packet. So today, if you were to subdivide your property, if you have a single family home and you have 10 acres of land, you would most likely you would have to come to the town's planning board and apply for a subdivision application if you wanted to add more than the existing home that sits on that property. The planning board today would encourage you to undertake a conservation subdivision. Okay, that's something that all subdivisions that come in, the planning board asks people to do, because the planning board is looking for you to protect the number of trees you take down, looking for you to protect the steep slopes on your property, if there are any, and is looking for you to protect the environmental sensitivities that may exist on your property. What's different in this watershed overlay is actually requiring any subdivision of 4 lots or more to be a conservation subdivision. And they're stating that you need at least 30% of your land to be preserved as open space or permanently preserved as part of the conservation subdivision. When the planning board is asking you to preserve or to undertake a conservation subdivision, they are asking you to preserve the environmental sensitivities or the natural the scenic resources or something that may be historically significant on your property. They're not codifying a percentage. This overlay is codifying a minimum percentage. In the regulation, there is a list of prohibited uses with things like landfills, dry wells, junkyards, fuel storage facilities, mining, bulk storage. None of the uses that are listed in the prohibited uses are allowed within our residential zoning districts unless you have a special exception from one of our boards. So this is just codifying more stringently that you cannot have these uses. You can't have them today. Soil disturbances from construction activities of greater than 5,000 square feet must comply with New York State DEC's stormwater erosion and sediment control standards. This requirement currently exists in our town code in relation to the East of Hudson watershed, the New York City watershed area. The New York City watershed area in Newcastle serves as a drinking water watershed, and it has a total maximum daily load calculation that is recognized by New York State DEC. The Indian Brook is part of Ossning's drinking water supply, and Ossning is moving towards development of a TMDL. They do not have one yet, but they are working on a surface drinking water plan endorsed by New York State DEC. The watershed municipalities have asked that everybody adopt the minimum 5,000 square foot requirement for erosion and sediment control. If you were to come in today into the planning board to subdivide your property, you would be disturbing more than 5,000 square feet of area, and you would be required to employ erosion and sediment controls. Impervious surfaces under the watershed protection overlay that are greater than 1,000 square feet must be treated for water quality volume, peak flows, and volume per the DEC stormwater manual, as well as chapter 108A, which says the very same thing. This is not a new regulation for the town of Newcastle when it comes to 1,000 square feet within a residential zone. Septic systems must be pumped at least once every 3-year period. So this is actually a new requirement for the town. In the New York City watershed, the state MS4 permit has always required a pumping once every 5 years. They have become more specific about that, and under the new permit, we have to demonstrate the pumping every 5 years. This requirement requires it every 3 years. Lawn chemicals should not be applied within 25 linear feet of any watercourse or wellhead buffer area. Newcastle does not have any wellheads within this watershed. Again, it's single family zoning. You have private wells. That is not a wellhead. A wellhead is a groundwater well or something related to a public water system. There's none of the wellheads for Ossning's drinking water supply are located in the town of Newcastle. We already do not allow the application of lawn chemicals within 150 feet of a wetland or a water body. So that is something that is in our code today. This is a code that is really looking at the villages and the town that do not have the land area that we have. The watershed overlay district requires wetland mitigation equal to twice the area of wetland buffer disturbance or wetland disturbance. Our wetlands code right now requires a 1-to-1 mitigation. If you are caught doing something and there's a violation issued or it's a super sensitive wetland, a town board, the planning board or the zoning board or the environmental review board or the environmental coordinator may require you to do 2-to-1 mitigation. If you're disturbing this area in the Indian Brook Overlay District, you will need to do 2-to-1. That's what this means. And that means if you disturb 100 square feet of a wetland, you need to mitigate 200 square feet in plantings or restoration on that property.
Sorry to interrupt, Sabrina, just want to make sure maybe I didn't hear clearly. So this is new.
2-to-1 is new.
2-to-1 is new, okay.
But
It's new, but we do
you
have.
still do it now, you can do it now, it's
We
not-
can do it now. Our code requires 1-to-1, but a lot of times if there's a project that comes into a board under a violation, they do offer up 2-to-1. So it's not unheard of in the town. It's just not codified as 2-to-1. It's codified as 1-to-1. Restricted buffer uses, so there's specific uses in this overlay protection zone. Lawn is not allowed today. The other uses are not allowed today. That 150-foot buffer has been a regulated buffer in our town code since the 80s, I think, in the 1980s. So we have 150-foot, we have 2 different levels of buffer. Our typical buffer is 100 feet throughout the town. But if you are within our environmental overlay district, which essentially covers the eastern and the western sides of town, your buffer is increased to 150 feet. And we just restrict the entire area, we don't single out the uses. This overlay is singling out the uses. There's no disturbance allowed within 200 feet of any wellhead or stormwater hotspot. Again, we don't have any wellheads. And a stormwater hotspot is really defined as a land use activity that generates a higher concentration of pollutants. So things like hydrocarbons, trace metals, we're talking about gasoline stations, automotive mechanic repair places, maybe depending on, a truck storage facility. We don't allow them in our single family zones. There's no wellhead protection, no wellheads, or stormwater hotspots. That's not to say we won't discover something that would qualify under the MS4 permit as a stormwater hotspot, as a violation or an illicit discharge. Those areas are regulated much more heavily than what this overlay district is calling for by DEC. Again, buffers adjacent to hotspots shall not extend 200 feet horizontally away from the hotspot source. We don't have any known hotspots in this area. And then there's some violation penalties that are listed in this code that talk about not more than $250 for each day or part thereof during which the violation occurs. Our town code has varying penalties depending on the type of violation that can range from $500 a day to $1,000 a day. So we are often more restrictive when it comes to a violation that is being proposed in the overlay district. And again, this is new activities. If there's something going on in a buffer today, let's say your shed is in that buffer today, this is not going to require you to remove that shed. You're not going to be under violation for that shed. It's only with new construction.
Question, if Newcastle does not allow any uses within 150-foot buffer, and there's 12 listed, we're more stringent now, so theoretically, these 12 uses for Newcastle residents are irrelevant because
Correct.
we're well beyond that.
Yes. You shouldn't do anything. If you wanted to mitigate and take down trees in your buffer area, you need to get a permit regardless. If you wanna take out invasive species, unless it's specifically written into your site plan by the planning board, you need to come back and request that the permission to take out your invasive species. Now, does that happen a lot? Probably not.
So it seems like one of the more stringent things is currently we charge more for fines and penalties.
Yeah.
And we're more lax, if I'm reading this right, in terms of taking care of our septics.
Yes,
So it's gonna be a more strict requirement now.
correct. And the 30% mandate of the
And
conservation.
I think, isn't it, and you may or may not know the answer, because I just had mine pumped, isn't it generally 2 to 3 years you should be pumping your septic anyway?
Correct.
And we don't have wells, for the most part. They do.
Yeah, we do. Everyone in this, in Newcastle's watershed area has private drinking water wells.
We don't.
You don't.
And that's it. That's a summary.
Okay.
So all 5 municipalities are in the process at various stages of their process to adopt this legislation. The town of Cortland has adopted the legislation as it is written. Changes to this legislation would have to be, if you want them considered, we would have to go back to all of the other municipalities and suggest it. And see if it's okay to change it for our community.
And Sabrina, has feedback been shared to you from your colleagues who share your position in those other municipalities in terms of those boards responding?
Cortland passed it.
Right, Cortland's obvious.
Cortland passed it. The other 2 municipalities are reviewing it. It impacts a municipality that is more densely developed and doesn't have as much open space, more so than it does a community like Newcastle. They are moving forward. I haven't heard any changes that they wanted to make, but the use lists, like the specificity in the lists, are for places like the town of Ossining, the village of Ossining, and the village of Croton-on-Hudson, because they're not as mono-zoned as we are.
So it seems as if almost they're catching up to us.
Correct. Yes, and again, you know, when we sat down at the table, everyone's like, well, what does your code say? What does your code say? Because we are lucky enough to be very advanced when it comes to our environmental protection measures.
Sabrina, how many parcels are in our section?
I do not have that list.
Sorry.
I wanna say
think
it
it's
was
like
102. It was
102.
102.
Yeah.
Yeah, we we have a list of all of the parcels they associate with the map.
Lauren's gonna know. Lauren, how many parcels were on the list for the letters that we sent out? 100 and...
It was about 103.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Sabrina. Do any of the board members have any further questions before we open it up, the public hearing? No? Okay. All right, so I will start. I have my list of names. If anyone hasn't filled out a card and think that they would like to make a comment, please go fill out a card with your name and address. Cards are over there. David Valdez, you did not state your address, so if you will,
Sorry,
go, it's okay.
64.
Come to the microphone, please. Otherwise, people won't hear you.
Thank you. 64 Glendale Road. So just addressing the summary, thanks very much, Sabrina, for that. I think we need to be very cautious about the language we use. It's talked that Cortland has passed this, but for all we know, it only applies to 2 parcels. Just like this legislation for the town of Newcastle only applies to 102 or 103 parcels, there are more than 5,800 parcels in Newcastle. So when you say Cortland passed it, to whom does it apply? Where are they in the district? Who is excluded? what is the conditions around their property? And I wanna get to it, but on the map, it seems very arbitrary. So give you just very simple example. Alapartis Road and the residents on Alapartis Road, but not the Abercrombie Estate, which has a Route 134 address, is included. Alapartis Circle, which is surrounded by ponds and water and flows directly into the Ossining water supply, is excluded. That doesn't make any sense. Soon as you go up Spring Valley Road, the houses stop being included as you approach T-Town, but everything south of it is included, including the houses that are south of Glendale Road on Spring Valley Road, where that water cannot possibly even get to the Indian Brook. So it doesn't hold together. Let me read my remarks and we'll go from there. So I'm David Valdez. I live in the town of Newcastle in the West End. I have an Ossining designated home address. Our parcel is 5 acres and our home hugs one corner of it towards the street, probably on half an acre or so. It has at least 3/5 of the property is outside the deer fence, is unused, though we very carefully manage all of it and have excluded all of the invasives and have worked for years to make it look perfect in terms of nature. It has exactly the kind of characteristics and property rights that the town of Newcastle is contemplating on actually taking away from us with this legislation. And I'll get to the numbers in a second. So I, for one, can tell you that I certainly appreciate efforts to manage and control water and water quality. We look out, I have hiked down the entire Indian Brook to Ossining, to the barbed wire fence that is their reservoir. I know what it's like, and I know what the whole water looks like. It's actually incredibly clear. Frogs, turtles, the birds. It looks like Newcastle in 1880. There's leaves that have covered the ground. There's all the trees except for the ones that have been felled by the diseases, the new sort of generation of trees. There's hardly a weed because nobody disturbs the leaves and nobody goes back there. So it's actually in really, really, really good shape. So we're trying to protect the water in a part of town that actually has incredibly good water. The members and the residents of the West End should be congratulated on their work. They don't pollute it, doesn't have soap in it, they don't dump chemicals in it, they don't do anything. When a truck came down Glendale Road, fell over and dumped their oil right into the Indian Brook, where was the town of Newcastle? Did they mitigate it? No. Did they call away the soil? No. Did they pull the oil out? No. So it's just it's not consistent in the rules to the homeowners. But let me go back to my notes, sorry. So I appreciate the water control, and I'm here to express my objection to the proposed overlay district, which attempts really to rationalize a far-reaching set of onerous regulations that will permit the town of Newcastle to deny or tax with fees the building permit requests, control of building materials that the property owners can use, and essentially take away their property rights without compensation. This rule, it's kept me up at night for about a month when I first found about it, because it actually kind of extinguishes hope. Right, you think, oh, well, I'm gonna pull together $2 million, I'm gonna build myself a glass house on the top of my 5 acres. I'm gonna build something discreet and beautiful and world class. And now I read, oh no, sorry, steep slopes, gotta protect the water, cut back, you have all these acres, but they don't count towards your property, but you're not reducing my taxes for it. The law is discriminatory and unfair because it seeks to solve a non-existent real issue, right? worries about water quality by penalizing the owners of just 102 parcels when we know how many there are. It's not applying to the whole town. Ossining has no complaint about its water supply or quality. The water in the reservoir from the Indian Brook is considered excellent, and it has been since forever. I think it's important to apply some math to the issue and provide a dollar value of what the proposed taking by regulation without compensation on a very conservative basis is, and to suggest an alternative approach and mention how ironic it is that the leadership team in Newcastle is said to be partnering with municipalities and what is the current situation of their water management. Ossining has raw sewage currently, today, right now, flowing into the Croton River and the Hudson. Okay, Cortland, who's held up as, oh, Cortland passed it. Cortland just gave a special permit for on the very corner of Glendale Road and Quaker Ridge Road, a 90-room hospital that is gonna be run off of septic and wells. That's Cortland, looking out for the water in our district. Newcastle itself, you run your business from this building, you're surrounded by hard surfaces, you have blacktops, you have the very building that would not be permitted in the West End.
Yep, that's true.
Right, you're in the middle of getting ready to develop 23 acres of land downtown. Is it gonna have like clay roads and grass on the roof? Right, so that's what you're gonna require of us in the West End. The proposed overlay district law will prevent the disturbance of soil within 200 feet. You know, there's all these rules. If I take the heel of my foot and in a rainstorm, and I divert the water course to get it from not flowing onto Glendale, but instead into a ditch on my property, that's illegal. If I have knotweed growing up into my living room, I cannot use any herbicides because of where my property is used. I have to call a vendor to, dig it out or whatever. It's just kind of crazy. We have to collect rainwater, right? And there's all sorts of things like that. So what are the costs? The current market value of a 2-acre as of right home parcel, and as you rightly pointed out, there's all these deductions, not 2 acres. It could be 5 acres to equal 2 acres under your rule because of the deductions. Based on very recent sales, they're worth $200,000 a piece, right? So let's just say, and I looked at all the parcels, I looked at all the square footages, I looked at the sizes. There's informally maybe 23 that have some development rights, that's it. So you would be taking away like basically $4.5 million in the stroke of a pen from the current owners off their balance sheets because they could not monetize that or use it for their own use after the rules are applied. What are the costs to the town? 23 parcels, taxes, $30,000 a year on a new house over the course of the 10 years or 20 years it's gonna take to build those out. First 30 years, $23 million forever. You will never collect that tax revenue. You will freeze the West End into being what it currently is. You will discourage improvement of property because it's going to be incredibly cumbersome. You're going to turn the West End into a museum of what you think the community should look like. The alternative really is just doing the work to actually identify the real measurable development potential on a lot by lot basis. Get into a conversation with the owner. Maybe it's 20 families. Some of the lots are 20 acres. Some of the lots are more than 100 acres. And work out a deal with them. Maybe it's a conservation easement as you encourage, but actually the word isn't ask, it's tell. And maybe you should grant an as of right building site to someone in exchange for extinguishing the worry about the water and the development in a new house and oh my God, the West End is changing. And earn the revenue from the tax revenue and allow that thing to exist. And the homeowner will be happy with it. So, again, This is over probably 20 potential home sites. Meanwhile, a huge overlay just to maintain your house. So that if I call Franzoso and I say, hi, replace my roof, or then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I have to submit a survey to the town because I want a parking space next to my house. $7,000 for that, for a formal survey. You know what the fees are.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Because I just wanna make sure, because I think facts are important and some of this is not clear to me. So we may agree or disagree, but for example, you referenced out of the gate about an oil truck spilling over and we did nothing. The DEC cleans that up, right, Joe? Yes. So it's not, you make it seem as if nothing
Okay,
happened.
so I'll take that back, so I withdraw that, that's not the town of Newcastle.
50 North Greeley is coming potentially to be built, and one of the things we're discussing with them is to have a sort of a living roof to help mitigate. So
Awesome.
to check, facts are important, so when
Right.
you're making statements, you wanna make sure we're on the same page.
Okay.
When you say take away your rights and it's far more onerous legislation, and this is more of a question towards you, I'm looking at this comparison and I realize it's just a very brief comparison. It seems as if a lot of this is either equal to or existing now, and the things that are more stringent potentially are the applicability, and other than that, it seems, pardon me, and the general provisions for wetlands, watercourses, and where it's 1-to-1 as opposed to 2-to-1.
And the septic.
So it's
Right,
something,
so-
but it's, I mean, it's not, it's really just a question because I don't understand. It seems to me it's already in existence for a significant portion, but
Right, so
that's why I'm a little confused.
in our case, we have a 5-bedroom septic. We have a certificate of occupancy for the use of the septic. And 2 people live there. And I talked to many of my neighbors who are like, I'm in Tahoe 7 months out of the year. I have a 5-bedroom septic. I'm never even home. I flush the toilet. I'm a single person 4 times in 2 months. Why do I have to now pay this, that prove to the town that I'm pumping my septic? Has a single septic run over and polluted anything
Yes. So I'm
in this
having
district?
In the town, yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm having also a hard time understanding to piggyback off what Jeremy is saying. So if we are in fact talking about 2-to-1 as opposed to 1-to-1 mitigation, we're talking about pumping septic systems. I'm having a hard time squaring that with concerns of taking of private property
Because-
and all of the
Because
the
you're
consequences, because the law already exists.
right, so
as
why
it
do you need
is.
a new law if it's already in place? I'm not contesting the
Right, but
current
the
law.
I think it's
the
more
new
for the
the
larger
new
area.
law, it's for the larger area, and the existing law is at least as stringent, if not more, than the new
And
law.
Victoria,
I'm
I would ask
having-
you, why doesn't
I'm
it
having a
apply
difficult-
townwide? Why doesn't it apply to Chappaqua? Why doesn't it apply to
Because all the
Millwood?
areas are, the areas are different, it's not going to
No,
apply
they
to
are
to the
coursing
ha-
with
to the
water, they
hamlet.
just haven't been defined as in this watershed. So
So I guess,
I
no,
wanna
my-
let others talk and stop, if I may. I don't wanna be
Please,
the
I will ask
defender
Sabrina, I'll
of
ask Sabrina,
the
please go
opposition.
ahead, make your comment, yeah.
Imagine, this is what it sounds like to us in the West End, what's being proposed. Imagine I take this very same legislation and I change the word water for birds, since we're very concerned about birds and bird strikes and bird population. And I say water courses and I say windows, right? And then 5 people in the West End say to Chappaqua, no more windows, cover them up. You gotta have anti-bird strike windows, gotta protect the birds. They're part of the flow through here. Here's the new rule, right? It's extremely onerous and it's prejudicial against the 2%, less than 2% of your residents for maybe 20 parcels. So you have a gigantic penalizing, worrisome set of rules that is gonna allow the department to deny or charge or get me another expert. Fees in order to get a 20 by, a parking space out of the town on your own land. And we don't rent our land from the town, right?
I'm sorry, David, these laws already exist.
Okay,
That's what-
Victoria,
You
I'm
would
asking you,
use- if you wanted,
if you wanted to formalize a parking space on your property and you were coming to the town for a permit, they would the building department would require you to obtain a survey.
Yes,
So-
but if I wanna sell 3 acres of land and let somebody build, or I wanna build up there, you're gonna tell me no, because now under the new slopes, steep slopes and the water and the
Those
this,
steep
that I'm
slopes
not going to be able to do
already
this.
exist. We will never tell you, we will never today, we have those regulations on our books. They are not prohibited regulations. They do not discount your buildable area on your property, but you are required to take restorative measures to ensure that disruption of the steep slopes occurs within a manner that does not impact water quality or affect your neighbor.
Have it applied to Chappaqua, have it applied to
It
Millwood,
does,
happy
it
to
does,
agree.
it does apply.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Corey Sitcha, please come up. Corey, you're up.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hi, Corey Siga, 64 Glendale.
Wait till you get to the
Getting up here, hi. Hey, it was great to watch the Envision Newcastle planning happen. I really appreciate like the process you've gone through. I've seen you guys really put like the work in and do the time. I think you're seeing a lot of angry people tonight because they didn't feel like that process happened on this side of town, and I think you'll see a lot of unhappiness up here. I just wanted to speak briefly. I'm opposed to this. I think it underscores existing environmental overlay stuff, which is far too strong. I've seen some of it in action in people's applications. It's extremely rigorous what we're putting people through. None of this neighborhood would exist with this regulation. None of these houses that people live in would be there. It seems a little beyond. I totally appreciate the comparison you gave us. That was extremely helpful. It still worries me, and I don't think it addresses the surface water issue that the town is worried about. Like David brought up before, the accidents on the street. There's a lot of things we can do as a town. We can close Glendale to traffic. We can do a ton of things. Everyone behind me just said, no. But like there's things we can do if we wanna radically help water supply and environmentalism in this town, and we should talk about those. And I don't love this. That's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. So sorry if I get this name wrong, but it says Cerulli DC.
That's Americanized, yes.
Very well. Okay, please come up.
Age has its privileges, and I was going to ask to stay there.
Well, you can, if you'd like to sit down, we'll just take in. Here.
All right, the first thing I,
We will
sit.
no, that's okay.
We want everyone to be comfortable.
Alright. Then wait 1 second and I'll adjust it down for you.
My first is a complaint. The letter that I received, I hadn't held because I was in Massachusetts, is dated May 31st. It was mailed on June 6th at 1 p.m. And the meeting is today at June 11th. That doesn't give many people in our area enough time to even try to digest this material. Now a positive, I don't know of anyone who doesn't have their septic system pumped, because if you do, you pay for it. Really, it will back up. When we have septic, the septic fields have to be very carefully taken care of. And anyone who lives in these 102 properties has to do that. It isn't even a matter of your regulations. And then the other one too is, my other one is also a complaint. Sunshine was not required. I now have my well water tested every month. In addition to that, I had to get a UV system to filter the water from the well through another 3 systems that I have. I have 4 systems that filter the water that I use in my house. And much of this happened with Sunshine. So where was Newcastle then?
Exactly.
And
they got solved right away. Right away, because their money, and they build so
Could you
many
please
of
not
those-
speak from the audience? You're very free to come up to the microphone. We welcome your comments. So retain your thoughts and please
agreeing
come
with
up to the microphone and don't interrupt the people
I'm
who
just
are
agreeing with her.
commenting. Thank you.
all right, the UV system cost close to $300,000, and that never occurred to me or my neighbor, the Hines, to sue Sunshine to get them to pay for it, but it was close to $3,000 to have it installed. And then every year it costs close to $500 to change the UV light, because if you don't, the beeping will drive you crazy. As far as I can remember, everything I've ever done to a deck or to the garage, etc., has required a permit anyway. And I don't know of anyone on my street who doesn't love trees, love water, love Glendale Road, never mistreating anything, because I think all of us are environmentalists from the ground up. And I think that's all I have to say, except that I'm concerned about receiving such notice so late.
I appreciate that, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and I love him.
Your neighbor.
Look at that. That must feel very nice. Okay, good. We have Anne Martin. Good evening.
You actually answered my question about the wellhead because they didn't specify if it was private or not, so that looked a little onerous. So that was actually my main question, but back to Sunshine, this was all floating around from 2007, 2008. Did Sunshine have to comply with this if we're worried about the water, protection of water, protection of land, disturbance of land? Did Sunshine, I mean, this 2007, 2008, Sunshine was approved in 2015, 150,000 square feet in my backyard. You should see it's LaGuardia Airport that I can see in the wintertime. It's lights as far as the eye can see. So did they have to comply with any of this?
Sunshine had standards that were related to the project that they were building, and they had to comply with Newcastle's codes. They were, as I said before, they're the only special exception use permit in this watershed, but he did have to comply with the buffers and all of the other elements that this code is trying to match.
So I have a question. They didn't have to have an environmental impact statement, but you're saying in here that any disturbance of over 5,000 square feet.
He had to do all of the erosion and sediment controls, all of the stormwater the water quality volume, all of the
That are
requirements.
Newcastle rules.
No, those are New York State DEC rules that the town had to adopt back in 2010, 29, 20, actually late 1990s, that are continually being updated. So
but
as a special use permit, he was required to put together a stormwater management plan that went through all of that.
So they got to, in a way, they got to write their own rules. They didn't have an
They
environmental
did
impact
not
statement.
write their own rules.
Okay, so I have a question. If you have to disturb more than 5,000 square feet, which, and you're like, don't worry, it's not gonna pertain to existing properties, but if we sell our property, or if we wanna expand our property, 5,000 square feet, so disturbance, you're saying not new construction, but I'm sure any addition would be
Correct.
considered part of it.
Yes.
So if we wanted to expand our house, we then have to go through another level of, it says DEC, level, a whole nother layer of
Erosion and sediment
protections.
control, which currently exists
Well,
within our
they're actually
codes.
not very specific about it. They say, what is it? New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Stormwater Manual dated 2014. So that's another level that the rest of Newcastle doesn't have to go through.
Oh, they absolutely do have to go through it.
Well, then why do we need this here?
So Sabrina, let me jump in. If I'm understanding this correctly, the reason why we quote unquote we need it is because it's expanding the area to have other communities conform
Correct.
for that region. So it's not as if, probably it's more impactful to some other municipalities than it is to us because we already have those standards.
Correct.
And anyone who's being more adversely from your perspective is being impacted, true or not, that's coming from a different municipality. Because
Correct.
most we have, it's them catching up to us for the most part.
Right, like for example, in the New York City watershed, those requirements exist today. They've existed for a while to protect New York City's drinking water. Now, those erosion and sediment controls are regulated by the New York State, what's called a Blue Book. It's their manual. We have adopted those standards in our town code and make reference to that for the New York City watershed area. This watershed group is out to protect the Indian Brook and Croton Gorge watersheds, which Indian Brook serves as a drinking water supply. So they're wanting to employ the same standards that New York City watershed is employing, that area of our town, in this area of our town, plus the areas in these other municipalities.
Okay, so just answer me this. I understand you're saying this watershed area, you wanna match up all the towns that match there. Are you telling me that literally everything that's going to affect our 102 properties as part of this already exists?
Not
No.
everything, not to the extent not to the extent as I identified tonight. There were a couple of areas, the septic system pump outs.
Right. But
Right?
you're saying
These-
any new expansion is in our subsection here, any new expansion, construction.
That 5,000 square foot erosion and sediment control is currently not a regulation. However, if you were to make an expansion that involved greater than 1,000 square feet of floor area, you would be required to do erosion and sediment control
Okay,
and
wait a minute,
water
just back
quality
up.
volume.
So, but you're saying, so there are different rules then?
What do you mean they're different rules?
So you're saying, you just said that there's no regulation, and then you kept talking, but I needed to like sort of back up to
There's
any
no
expansion.
requirement on 5,000 square feet right now in this area for erosion and sediment control solely. So if you're
And
not.
so that whole other sentence about, complying with the Department of Environmental Protection or the DEC, that layer of review, that thresholds holds true for the rest of Newcastle.
It holds true for the east of Hudson watershed area
Okay, is that the rest of Newcastle?
It is not the rest of Newcastle.
Okay, so it is different. It is different.
What I said, in Newcastle, there's one other watershed that has this requirement, and that is the east of Hudson watershed. That's not the whole town, it's a large part of the town.
And where is that? I don't understand.
It's actually the east of Hudson watershed covers part of Millwood. Does not cover part of Chappaqua, but then it covers the entire
And when was
eastern
that
portion
put
of
into
town.
effect? When were those properties?
1996, maybe it was the revised regulations.
So then our regulations are gonna match their regulations.
The requirement for the erosion and sediment controls will match their regulations.
Okay, I'm sorry. I sometimes feel like you're like I'm
There's two
losing
different-
things in the semantics here, and like I
Well,
feel
there's
like there's
two
words
different-
being thrown like
There's two different requirements. There's requirements for erosion and sediment controls which involve disturbance of ground.
Okay, so the thing is you keep using those terms, erosion and sediment control and disturbance, but there's a really general sentence here that says that, disturbance of 5,000 square feet should comply with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Stormwater Manual 2014. So we don't really know what all that is. So we don't really know how prohibitive that is. And I'm just saying it seems to us, and we feel a little, Sunshine was a bitter pill to swallow because 150,000 square feet is in our backyard, and we're worried about water, and we're worried about protection, and whatever. There's no point in really-
Can I point you to talk to the town board?
Okay, all right, I'm sorry, but so I feel like the value of our property is probably negatively impacted, because if we go to sell a property and they do a review and they say, oh, whoa, that house is in this special area, so you're gonna have to go through a whole nother layer of protections, then and maybe they'll pass, maybe you say DEC and people are like, whoa, no, that's gonna be a problem. So we just feel targeted, and we already take care of our water, our property. There's no problems here. We just feel very targeted. It's not happening anyplace else, no offense, but I don't think any of you guys are part of the 102 properties, so it's really easy to take, to put, overlays of mitigating things on somebody else's property. And we do feel targeted. I feel like it does diminish the value of our property because there's mitigations on any further expansion or building on our property. I understand you're saying that it's it's, you know, there's no real change, it's already there, but I don't think that's actually, I think we're slicing and dicing that a little bit, so, you know, I that's it, that's all I have to say, thanks for your time.
Thank you, what I would add, that we don't really need the clapping, I mean, we won't, you know, we take comments very seriously with or without it. I think that one thing we need to do is delineate with a lot more clarity what exactly is the same, and my understanding is that much of the requirements here are the same as the existing requirements, so that for me is the thing that I'm really trying to understand. But I think that we could perhaps create another chart for the next public hearing to clarify what exactly is different and maybe do it more clearly than we've done. You know, I thought it was pretty clear, but I think people are having a hard time.
I can
But if we can, yeah.
Madam Supervisor, I understand what you're saying, but it is very difficult other than taking, I've identified the areas. You know, under G, performance criteria number 1, if I read it out loud, the entire thing, it is clear what it's talking about. All construction activities as defined by the town of Newcastle that involve soil disturbances greater than 5,000 square feet shall comply with New York State DEC Stormwater Manual. All construction activities shall be required to meet the standards of the Speedy's general permit for construction activities that involve soil disturbances greater than 5,000 square feet. And if they involve new impervious surfaces greater than 1,000 square feet, must also follow or create a stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Is that for all of Newcastle, or is that just for people who are within the EOH watershed?
That one requirement tied to the 5,000 square feet of soil disturbance with or without development of an impervious surface. So if you wanted to clear cut and put in a playground and it's more than 5,000 square feet, you need to make sure that your clear cutting and your playground do not run soil and sediment outside of the area that you're disturbing.
So that
It
applies
means
to
put
all
up
of
a
Newcastle,
that-
not just east of Hudson
It only
watershed.
applies at 5,000 square feet to a drinking watershed at this point with this legislation. Now, if you tie that 5,000 square feet with an impervious surface, an area where the water can't go through, then you are required to do a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is the second, number 2. A lot of times, we do not see just 5,000 square feet of disturbance as part of a building permit. There's always some sort of development, and usually it's 1,000 square feet or more. Okay? So in this watershed, because of the smaller municipalities with less land area, they are breaking it down more defined than we would otherwise do it if it was not mandated by a drinking watershed.
Can you repeat that?
So if you have land area that's not in a drinking watershed, you will not see this requirement.
Right, so if you're living in town.
If you live in the Long Island Sound watershed portions of town or the Bronx River watershed within town, it does not apply because those watersheds don't supply drinking water to people.
So I have to say, like, on further clarification, I understand the feeling of the residents that are here tonight because it does certainly feel like it applies to a very specific group of people who I think historically often feel a little bit left out of the conversation because they live on the West End. So I'm hearing that, and I just wanna make sure that I'm understanding where you're all coming from. So I appreciate the comments and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have a map of the east of Hudson?
So I'm trying to look it up right now, I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, we do. Hang on, let me do it while I sit here and I'll share my screen.
I think we should also point out that this chart, although it's very helpful. It's a resource, okay, and it shouldn't be relied on in its entirety. It's not intended to be a complete analysis of all the changes, and it shouldn't be relied on in its entirety. If anybody's wants to have a complete understanding of what the law implies, we have to refer to the original source. But we do appreciate the resource, but it's just a reminder for the record.
It's the legislation,
It's
I
the
guess.
draft
Yeah,
the legislation.
Yeah.
And everybody got it. I don't know.
Okay, Cynthia, Sabrina, while you're looking for that, I'll call someone else up. Cynthia, oh, I'm sorry, can't really read the handwriting very well. At 100 Glendale Road, sorry, I can't get your last name.
Okay, hi, it's Cynthia Manchurian at 100 Glendale Road, and I've owned my property for about 25 years. I will say that there are passionate people in the room, and I'm definitely one of them. I might be a little repetitive based on the other points, but since I'm not a good public speaker, I'm gonna read my notes. Okay, so Sabrina identifies 102 parcels in the Newcastle Indian Brook Basin. I find it incredible that you would run a public meeting on such an important topic, like many others, where I received the notice on Saturday. People are very busy and scheduled. They might not be around like one of these ladies on the weekend, and the ability to show up to read the material and to know it's really about where you live, it's really hard with such short notice. So I'm hoping that you keep the public comment period not only open, but provide future public meetings for this topic. So under K, the effective date of legislation, you plan on filing this legislation with the New York Secretary of State by June 30th. That's what I heard in your work session. How are you gonna do that with this number of people? And these are only the people from Saturday who showed up. I don't think you can. And then I'm wondering, is this just a moot point and essentially you're just looking for buy-in from all 5 municipalities for the exact same thing? So we might say whatever we want about how we feel about how Newcastle should respond to legislation, but in the end, does it matter? Or is it just uniform for the 5 municipalities? So I feel like you're playing beat the clock to submit this important legislation when in fact the original document, as mentioned, was created in 2008, so why the rush now? I don't understand. And I'm just wondering if Newcastle will benefit from any funds if the deadline is met. Is that the reason to push at this time? So Newcastle commercial entities in the Indian Brook Basin. There should be no further special permits for commercial entities in our R2A zone ever. Sabrina mentioned during the work session that Newcastle has only issued permission for one such entity, Sunshine Home. So I'm not gonna go into that, but I was a leader against that project in the day. But you can hear from these other people before I open my mouth how we all feel about the approval of that project. It's a travesty. And by the way, if you think about it, a project like that, so many issues that we weren't happy with, but based on this legislation, just the additional traffic, which is dangerous, goes against protecting water quality because they're using all the roads that literally abut the buffer, the wetlands, Indian Brook. They're using the same Glendale, Spring Valley, Alapartis roads and adding pollution, which you're trying to prevent. So there are 2 other examples of that. One was both were mentioned. The Abercrombie Castle, so that should never get a special permit. And the planning board about a year ago was very interested in a novel concept to create a retreat for some commercial entity that was interested in environmental activities and built a lot of cabins and the main house as the retreat center. that should never happen. And then, as mentioned, Cortland is in the final stages of approving the Hudson Wellness Drug Rehab Project. They own 22 acres on the Newcastle side, so that makes you guys a very interested party. The primary roads that they're gonna use for commercial traffic are Newcastle roads, Glendale, Spring Valley, Alapartis, all the roads that we live on. And again, just from a pollution standpoint into these water bodies, it should be a no. I wanted to move on to E15, the calcium chloride application. De-icing calcium chloride use is restricted to the minimum amount needed for public safety as determined by the town highway superintendent. Statement is too general, too vague, and this use cannot be enforced during a bad weather anyway. On my property, I try to use sand until I literally can't get on or off the property. But I believe if you expect the residents of the West End to restrict their salt use to a minimum, whatever that is, you should also restrict the town's ability to use the calcium chloride when de-icing our rural roads that sit in the middle of the Indian Brook watershed. You're the biggest offenders. You have to go through Glendale and Alapartis and Spring Valley and throw salt all over the place. And the buffers are literally right there. The wetlands, the Indian Brook are right there. So you're the biggest offenders. And when you look up alternatives, you should both educate the public about these alternatives and lead by example. From what I understand, magnesium chloride and sodium acetate ice melt are much better materials to use in these sensitive areas. And it would be great if Newcastle led by example on that discrete topic. Another one, F, general provisions for wetlands, watercourses, water bodies, wetland buffer areas, and steep slopes. So development of any of these water bodies except where no reasonable alternative exists or where the applicant would otherwise suffer undue hardship if a permit is not issued, quote, and in the event such development is approved, impact shall be minimized to the greatest extent practicable and a mitigation plan shall be prepared. That's in the legislation. This statement is vague and sounds like the review process will not be consistent. I even feel I need to think about the statement more, and I live in the watershed. I think Newcastle Town Board should also think through this statement more carefully to understand its full meaning and possible scenarios. What I do know is that there should be no special permits for commercial entities in the West End. It's R2A zoning, residential. Consideration of suffering undue hardship for residential property needs to be much more explicit and not left to a case-by-case basis with the interpretation of this legislation. If the regulation is so restrictive, please lay out the exceptions and let the residents respond during a future public meeting. We don't know what exceptions you would accept. Again, the local residents will not forgive Newcastle for permitting Sunshine Home. They did everything wrong. And they wound up blasting and changing the contour of their steep slopes, building in drainage infrastructure to counter the damage that they did to their property. So, and later on in this meeting, they were considering accepting a bond for $50,000 to pay for mitigation if the town has to get involved. That amount would never cover the repair of the facility's runoff infrastructure if there were a problem that led to runoff from their steep slopes onto Spring Valley Road. So I would say no to that because it's not enough money. Town responsibilities. I'll add that the town should have its part to play as well for disturbing or removing vegetation and trees. F5. In the summer, the town comes through our roads, which are directly adjacent to these wetlands and waterways, and mows the vegetation down, including tall grasses and other plants, to about 3 inches. By doing so, you are absolutely damaging the biodiversity of these sensitive areas. The vegetation sits on the edge of these waterways and not only protects the perimeter from heat and evaporation, but also acts as a habitat for all the local animal species that depend on the wetland and waterway environments for their survival. Again, if Newcastle wants to restrict residents from creating lawns with the buffer zones, please lead by example. And you don't need this legislation to implement this kind of environmentally sensitive action. C4 says within the Indian Brook, Croton Gorge, and my IMA watershed protection overlap district, the applicant shall be required to create replacement wetlands, restore, recreate, enhance existing wetlands, or wetland buffer areas equal to twice the area, etc., etc. Your suggestion suggests that future property owners should be told before investing in this area what the regulations are and not be offered the opportunity to destroy existing wetlands in the future. On the other hand, imposing these new regulations on existing property owners who own more than 4 acres, like Dave Valdez mentioned, is a taking or diminution of their investment. Their property values will be diminished, and if the legislation passes, their tax assessments, mine, should be reduced as well. Will the town board consider this as part of the deal? Residents have bought into the community with an understanding of their rights, and you are absolutely curtailing them. I'm not gonna reiterate some of Dave Valdez's calculations, but it does impact on our cost of maintenance as well. And I wanna remind you all, I did a study with overlay maps for the Croton Reservoir. And it turns out that like 70% of Newcastle, as I look at it, the land is included in the Croton Reservoir watershed. And I did a map, which I'm sharing with you. I hope I have enough. I'm gonna give you one, Sabina.
Thank you.
You'll see the outline of Newcastle. You'll see all the water basins in the area, some of which are reservoir basins and some of which are not. Oh, I might not have enough.
You can take this one.
No, I do. There we go. Karen, can you split this one out?
I will split it.
So I took the New York City Environmental Protection Water Supply Map and the Westchester GIS drainage divides.
Cynthia, nobody could hear you when you're over there. So
Sorry,
you just
I took the New York City Environmental Protection Water Supply Map and the Westchester GIS drainage divide environmental features map. And what I come up with, I don't know if you can see because my printer kind of ran out of ink, but I highlighted Indian Brook Basin in, it looks like canary yellow. And then the green area is the Croton Reservoir watershed. And you can see how much of Newcastle is included. And I might be off a mile or two, my computer skills, not great, but roughly. So because the Croton Reservoir watershed area covers so much of Newcastle, you did mention the east of Hudson overlay. But I wonder, is it apples to apples? Is that area implementing the exact same regulations as you're expecting West End residents to deal with? As an aside, projects like the Yeshiva Commercial Solar Farm located in Newcastle directly abutting the Croton Reservoir should be rejected immediately. And I saw the planning board start to look at that in their application. So from what I understand, the legislation is really about supporting the water quality and transmission of it into the Indian Brook Reservoir. Our aquifers are mentioned here, but I don't know why they are in this document, because aquifers are a town issue for town residents. Really, this legislation is about an intermunicipal agreement to protect Osning's reservoir water. So I don't really get that. So I'm urging you not to vote to pass this legislation today or in the near future. There are too many inconsistencies that have not been properly thought through. And the document really penalizes West End residents. The June 30th Albany deadline seems arbitrary to me. The residents deserve more time to get informed about the legislation, more opportunities to discuss it. There should even be, honestly, for starters, a Millwood West End board meeting with the community to get everyone's ideas kind of consolidated before the town board public meeting. I still think we would benefit from that kind of meeting and then bring that back to you. That's why that board exists. So please give the community more lead time and more public meetings with regard to this very important legislation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have something from another resident who's not able to be here because Croton is also having a meeting on the Hudson Wellness Project today. I don't know if I should submit it at the end of the meeting or read it on her behalf.
You can submit it or they can certainly email it to us.
It'll become part of the public record.
And when is at this point, I hope you'll extend, but at this point, when is the deadline for submission?
We have not closed it. We are going to extend the public hearing through to June 25th. I think, is that the Tuesday? June 25th, then we'll probably leave it open for written comments for a few days after that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sabrina, just very quickly, what is the east of Hudson up on that map?
It's, the east of Hudson is the green area.
So at least geographically, it looks like more than half of Newcastle, just talking solely about the septic issue. Pardon me. Yeah, it was a septic issue, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Requires every 5 years.
3.
This proposed overlay district is requiring every 3 years.
Correct.
In the east of Hudson, they're looking at once every 5 years.
Okay. So that's the difference between the two on that.
Yes.
Okay, Bruce Topman.
And one of the things that comes up with that 5,000 square foot issue, if I'm reading this correctly, Newcastle requires that same within the east of Hudson watershed, so
It's
this concern or issue that's being raised, that 5,000 square feet, you're stealing these rights from me, what about the rest of Newcastle? It looks, at least especially on our east end, which is wide open, on much larger lots than someone like me who lives close to town, multi-acre lots, they're subject to this 5,000 square foot rule already.
Correct. And again, that rule is not to say you can't build it, but you need to put, for example, a silt fence around the area that you're disturbing so that the soil doesn't run off your property or into a water body or wetland.
Okay.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Good evening, sir. Sorry to keep you waiting.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Bruce Topman. My family and I have lived over 50 years at 78 Glendale Road. I guess we're one of the 102 subject to this proposal.
Is the mic off?
The mic.
And
Just turn it,
lift
lift it up,
yeah. Yeah, perfect.
There you go.
Better?
Yes.
Sorry, I won't repeat what I said. I'm sort of on the older side, and all the environmental science has somewhat gone by me. But I don't understand why that boundary is there. Who figured out that boundary, and why is it there, as opposed to somewhere else?
You mean the green?
I mean the part that Newcastle is included in this overlay. Who figured out that boundary and why?
Boundary is actually determined by New York State DEC.
And what does the boundary represent?
The boundary is a hydrologic boundary of everything within that line flows to a specific point,
What specific point is that?
the Indian Brook Reservoir.
So you're saying that everything in that part of Newcastle feeds
Within
water,
that boundary,
feeds water in from Newcastle into the Indian Brook.
correct.
I see. But we don't get our drinking water from
No, you
Indian
do
Brook.
not,
We have nothing to do with that, right?
correct.
Okay. So the towns that get their water from there are Ossining and Croton.
Correct.
And neither of those places have passed this overlay, correct?
They're in the same process we are.
They haven't passed
They
it.
have not passed it.
And we don't know if they're gonna make any changes to it.
Not yet,
Okay. Now, Cortland, you say passed it.
correct.
Well, I'm not a really good techie, but I looked at the code of Cortland. I didn't find it in there. Maybe they're 5 months behind in putting it up there, but I didn't find it. So maybe I'm not good at it. And I don't know what kind of changes they may have made, if they
They
did
didn't make
pass it.
any changes. If a municipality is making changes to the overlay district, in order to make those changes, they have to inform the rest of the municipalities the changes they are making.
But they can make the changes.
Yeah, nobody
Okay.
can tell this town board what to do,
Okay. So Cortland could have made changes,
not without notifying us.
but we haven't seen it's not in the code though. It's not online.
Well, and it takes at least 30 days,
This
to
thing
be
was finalized
filed.
in March.
but it
I
has
don't
to be
think Sabrina
filed
can
with New
speak
York
to-
State.
I don't think Sabrina can speak to why it's.
I just think it raises a question about Cortland, that's the only point I'm making. I'll move off that, okay. But my other point is though, that the two towns that are prime. Sorry. Remind
Be the
me.
techie, you have to be the techie.
You're right. Sorry. The point really is that the two towns that are really most concerned with this issue have not acted. They haven't passed it. So we, who are very minorly involved, because the whole Indian Brook thing doesn't supply anybody any water supply in Newcastle. And the only other water supply involved in this supplies individual wells owned by the 102 property owners who don't want this to be passed. So what kind of sense does that make? My point is, if we're gonna do something about this, I would suggest it'd be more prudent to wait to see what the two towns that really care about this do. Why should we be out front? And then they say, no, it's no dice, and we're sitting here looking like whatever we're gonna be looking like. My proposal would be you should at least defer until you see what those towns are gonna do. Whether they're gonna make changes, they'll inform you of the changes, then you can evaluate it. But why should we be the leader on something that has very little concern with Newcastle? Okay, first point. Second point is, I just wanna come back to the boundary issue. You said this boundary that you've used is set up by New York State?
It's not a boundary that I used. This project is supported by New York State DEC. They have given the town of Cortland a grant on behalf of all 5 municipalities. The boundary was calculated by New York State DEC. There's specific language in here as to where it comes from. And it talks about if you disagree with the boundary, how it's interpreted, particularly in relation to roadways and lot lines, and if you are contesting the boundary, and further refinement if you have a project. So that's what's set forth in the
So
legislation.
we don't have to accept the boundary.
There is a boundary that is hydrologically determined. If you don't believe your property drains the way that this watershed is telling you it drains, you can document it and contest your location in the
But
watershed.
there's nothing in the overlay that permits anybody to do that.
It does.
In the overlay that you have here?
If you look at boundaries,
Yes.
if you
Could you-
which is section D,
Yes.
it talks about how they were created.
Well, let me catch up to you again for a minute. Okay, so section D,
Number 2, where uncertainty exists as to the boundaries shown on the watershed map, the following shall apply.
yes,
So where area boundaries are indicated following a street, railroad, or highway line or center lines thereof, such lines shall be construed as said boundaries. Where area boundaries are indicated as approximately following lot lines, such lot lines shall be construed to be said boundaries. However, a survey plat prepared by a registered land surveyor may be submitted to the municipality as evidence that one or more properties along these boundaries does not lie within the protected area.
Could you just tell me, Sabrina, I'm sorry for being ignorant.
No.
But where do I find the DECP or whatever it's called? I'm sorry, the initials are not so good.
Department of Environmental Conservation.
Thank you. Where do I find their determination of what that new part of Newcastle is included in this thing? How do I find that?
Right now, they provided this map.
But there's nothing in writing? They just gave you a map without any written
I
information?
think we're,
I'm sorry.
That's right, but to try to move this along.
Yeah,
This has been a map for how many decades?
Decades.
So it's the state has it, and if I'm understanding this correctly, just using this as an example, Sabrina, if you live square in the middle of Mount Kisco, you're not challenging the east of Hudson, you can't, you're there. If you wanna challenge it, it's someone who's living along the border, but even if you did
Let's talk about the east of Hudson watershed for a minute, because there was a big concern about Millwood where that boundary line runs directly through. Any application that the town receives to do something in Millwood that is in proximity to the interpretation of that line is submitted to DEP for determination of jurisdiction. Because the town is not equipped to go out there and do the hydrology on a private property. But it's DEP's watershed and they will make that determination.
So I think if there's an issue, it's sort of taking up with your state legislator about the boundaries or in the DEP.
Well, no, if somebody is within this watershed and they don't agree, they obtain a survey.
Contact the DEP and they can.
Not the DEP, they would hire a surveyor to define their lot lines in relation to the watershed line, because a watershed is determined based off of topography, right? And so you may have a high point on your property if you're on the edge, and you may have a ridge in between your property. Half your property falls this way, half your property falls that way. This gives definition as to how that property should be considered in totality in or in totality out. So it's really left up to the professionals who do the delineation to define the delineation on an individual property. Because this mapping is only good like up to 2 feet, maybe more. You can't rely on a map that's on a screen. You have to do more field analysis if you're gonna contest it. But like you said, if you're in Mount Kisco, you're definitely within the east of Hudson watershed.
So this is only for people on the border, so if there's an issue with that, maybe we can discuss that offline because
Okay.
it's just gonna.
Alright, I'm sort of over that topic. I don't understand it still, but it seems to me that, I think David mentioned something, Alapartis Circle is not in it, but Alapartis is in it. It doesn't sort of ring common sense wise, the construction of these lines that include places and don't include other places. Okay, that's the only point I'm making. The other thing is I got this chart tonight, and then I heard Mr. Schiaretta.
No, actually, that's my partner. I'm Mike Starvaggi. Lino's my partner. I'm here.
You're a lawyer?
I am.
I should have guessed, because you say the chart, we can't rely upon it, because it's not complete or something?
Well, it's a reference tool.
But we can't rely on it.
Right.
Okay.
He has to say that.
I understand.
It's not a legal.
The problem then is that
It's not a legal document.
I understand that, but what I don't understand is, you see, I understand where it talks about the Indian Road overlay, but when it talks about the code, I mean, you've gotta be more than a lawyer to find where it says that. Like you say, the 12 uses as listed for buffers, that these are all, Newcastle doesn't allow that anyhow. But there's no site to it. How do you go look that up? How do I know that? I mean, that's just a not a helpful statement to me. I'd like to read where it says every one of those 12 buffer uses are allowed. Because pesticides, for example, which are not allowed, that's one of the uses, right? So, let me read you something from the code that I found about that. This is the Wetlands Code, section 137-4, chapter 137. It says the following. Activities permitted by right. Let me go back to the microphone. sorry. The following activities are permitted by right within any wetlands or wetlands buffer. And I'm quoting, J, depositing herbicides, pesticides, or fertilizers in a wetlands buffer in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations and accepted horticultural practices. That's what the code says now. It does not prohibit pesticides like this chart says, or like what the folks proposing this is. It just doesn't, because that's what the code says, something completely different, something that actually makes sense. You comply with the manufacturer's code requirements, which presumably are probably cleared by the state, and you're good to go. Nobody makes blanket things like that. Don't do this. Don't add a new lawn. That's another one. Don't add a new lawn. Why? What's wrong with a new lawn? It makes things nice instead of brown. Unless there's a showing that these things will harm the environment in some way, it doesn't make any sense. So at a minimum, you should have a permit procedure for each one of these buffer things that says, okay, I can show you that I'm complying with the pesticides of the manufacturer, they've been approved, and I'm not harming the environment. I can show you that my additional lawn is not gonna harm the environment. I can show you all these other things that in fact they're not gonna harm it. But that's not what this does. This says no. End of story. No opportunity for anybody in the West End to show there's no harm. That's just not right. It's not fair. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay. Impervious surfaces, new impervious surfaces. None of those are allowed either in the buffer zone. But I read somewhere else that you're allowed to do impervious surfaces if you're building a 5,000 square foot something, so long as you comply with certain rules and regulations. Okay, I understand the reason for rules and regulations that are required, but that's not what the buffer thing says. The buffer thing says, no, you can't do it. No impervious surfaces. It's just not consistent. In a much larger project, I can do it if it's okay with the rules and regulations, but for a smaller little impervious thing, let me give you an example. Let's say you got an older person who needs to build a walkway, pave a walkway to get access to his home. They can't walk anymore on the uneven ground, they have to have pavement. Okay? So they say, okay, I'm gonna build. I said, no, you can't do that. Flat. Well, could I at least explain to you why I wanna build a paved one? And can I please explain to you why it won't hurt the environment? No. The buffer says you can't do it. You're stuck. You're too old, but we don't really care. That's not right. It's not fair. All right. I'm almost there. So the two things I would like to sort of summarize. One, there should be a permit for all these things and not blanket no's. And two, we should defer until the towns that really care, that really are affected, which we are not, approve this project. And then we can make whatever changes we want and tell them we made the changes, and then we do it. Okay? The other thing, last thing. Everybody so far has spoken and said that the people in the West End are pretty environmentally conscious. I think that's probably true. We're in a genteel kind of area. We moved there because we want to be sort of like in the country. We care about that kind of stuff. Okay. There's not a single bit of indication in this overlay or in anything that Sabrina has said, excuse me if I call you by your first name.
You may.
Thank you. To suggest there's a problem with the water courses in our area. That anybody in our area, in the West End of 102 property, have caused a problem. So this whole overlay thing is a solution in search of a problem where there is none. Why would you discriminate against a bunch of people who live well, don't bother anybody, and are not offending anybody? It's just not the right thing to do. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
If I may make a correction, in the environmental overlay district, we do require 2-to-1 wetland mitigation. Okay, so I think, so that's important.
We do it currently.
Yeah, we do right now.
One more thing I'd like to ask, if I may. I'm sorry for,
Okay,
you know, it's
just other people are waiting.
it's a
But go
2-second
ahead,
thing.
go ahead.
Could I ask if you could redo this chart? When you say it's allowed by the code currently, if you could please just cite to the code that you're relying upon to say that. And then we can look at it.
Okay,
Thank you.
alright, thank you. And next we have Yolanda Zinin. Sorry, I'm not good at reading.
She's on.
Oh, she's on.
Yes.
Yeah, so
I'm here. Yeah, so what I agree with everything everyone is saying. One of the things that I wanted to point out is if this change is benefiting everyone, why are we only targeting specific properties? It just seems unfair. This is certainly gonna impact our property. If we wanna make any updates to our home, it just seems like it's going to be an entire process and probably more costly. It will probably impact the value of my house as well. And, I feel like this evening has been about everyone voicing their concerns and us opposing this. But unfortunately, it doesn't really seem like you're very receptive to all of our concerns. Like, if we are all voicing that we don't like this, we don't agree with it, are you just going to move forward with it anyway?
I think we're trying to all understand what the residents of this area are saying. And we're trying to square that with, what the existing law is and what the real changes are. So, but we're listening to you. I mean, I agree that there should have been more notice to the residents. So I wish that had happened. I think that we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you're saying. I think there wasn't enough opportunity for the residents to be really clearly informed of the requirements that currently exist and what the real differences are between those requirements and this law. So that's what I think, and yes, we definitely wanna hear from you. And we are going to be considering everything we hear. Most definitely, so I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I'm glad to hear that, yes, you will take it into deep consideration. But really, what does that mean? And, one of the comments some people made is that this feels really rushed. And I don't want for us tonight to voice our concerns and then for us to again get a late notification, maybe have missed the notification because we didn't see it, didn't have enough time to prepare, didn't attend a meeting, and then we're left in the dark or blamed as saying, oh, well, you just didn't show up or you didn't respond. So I want there to be clear communication with all of the residents and really have us understand what the impact to our property is going to be to us. I mean, this is our lives. Yeah, this another comment a lot of people made is that, maybe it's not impacting you guys, but this is impacting us. So we want clear transparency. We deserve that.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more cards. Is there anyone else in person who would like to speak who hasn't spoken already?
There's one hand.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just finishing up here. We can go back, but we'd let other people who haven't spoken yet get a chance.
Is Nicole still here? She had actually.
She left, so yeah. Okay.
What about the two people with their hands raised?
I'm getting to that. I'm about to get to that. Well, I don't know who came first. Garrett Cerulli. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Garrett Cerulli, 56 Glendale Road, my brother Mark and I, trustees for that property for our 95-year-old mother, Laura Cerulli, who you heard earlier. I agree with everything that has been said so far. The lack of notice is really egregious, and I'm sure you can understand how that does not inspire trust in this process. The lack of clarity on what is changing versus what is existing also does not inspire trust and leaves all of these property owners confused as to what they're going to be expected to do and how much it's going to cost under these new regulations. So one of the things that I would ask, and I think was asked earlier as well, is we would all like to see a breakdown of what's existing and proposed and then what that means to homeowners. So for example, I think most, if not all of these homes are within the buffer zone that's defined. And I understand that means there's going to be additional requirements and things like the impervious surface, things like that. What does that mean? So if my mother needs to replace the driveway on her house, which is, probably one of the projects that we'll have to do, already difficult when you're her age, to have that kind of project completed, what other steps are going to be required? What other costs are there going to be? And I know that it's been said, well, the town has existing regulations that are, very stringent, these have already been in place. Which brings me right back to why are we doing this? And if there are differences, then we need to know what those are. This definitely, to me, seems like it's some form of eminent domain taking because there's impact to the homeowners, impact to values, and impact to their rights on the properties that does not seem to be compensated. And then that brings me to another question that was also asked earlier. Is there a proposed tax reduction for the impacted property owners? And if there is, what's the formula? And what will that look like? So property owners can have an understanding of how that would offset the burdens of the new regulations. And if that's not under consideration, then why not? And the last question I have, which I'd love to hear is, and I think this was mentioned earlier, are Newcastle and the other towns set to receive any state or federal funding by passing these regulations? Is that part of the calculations for doing this? I know we talked about water quality, we all agree that's important. I think everybody who's lived in that neighborhood, and my family's owned that property for over 40 years, I grew up there. We've all tried to be very good stewards of the environment and our properties, right? It's one, it's the right thing to do, but two, self-interest, right? We try to keep our properties up, keep nature up, that's why we moved there. But the rush to do this and do this now makes us all want to understand, is there funding at stake? Aside from the stated requirements or needs to, urgently protect the watershed. So those are the questions that I think I know I would like to see answered, and I'm pretty sure that most of the other property owners would like to see them as well. Oh, one other thing before I finish. Just going back to, this has been brought up, but the lack of precision in the language for the proposed regulations is really also concerning. Just lack of definitions between private and public things. The wellhead's a great example of that. And then that definition of the new burdens that will be imposed on homeowners and property owners.
Are you referring to the definitional section in the legislation?
Yes, I'm referring to what little I was able to read of the regulations in the time I had between my mom finding out and this meeting. But I think we've already covered that lack of notice and lack of clarity, and it sounds like the town is committing to doing better.
Okay. All right, sorry, it's hard to tell when you're online if you're concluding, is that?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm
all right.
concluded, but could you answer any of those questions now, or could we expect a follow-up in writing?
So can you summarize your questions?
Sure.
You're talking about
Yeah.
grants. There are always grants available to the town. To my knowledge, there are no grants that were directly connected.
The town of
Sabrina, you mentioned
Yeah, the town
one
of
grant.
the town of Cortland received a grant from New York State for the 5 municipalities to create the overlay protection district. I don't know how much was received offhand.
But it's for the purposes of doing
Of creating this, yes,
of doing-
the consultant that was hired was Weston and Sampson. The town of Cortland facilitated the consultant. They received the grant, facilitated the consultant who did all the legwork comparing and contrasting each municipality's regulations.
So is it fair to say that those monies were directed towards creating the legislation and
Correct,
creating
there's no
the various standards with consultants and their
Correct.
lawyers, et
We're
cetera?
not being financially
So we're not
incentivized
getting
to-
money
No, we
for
are not.
anything unconnected to the legislation?
No, we are not.
Okay, so there's
So
no,
the answer is no
no
to
funds
that.
tied to passing it, as opposed to funds.
No, and I was not aware of any such funding, but we just confirmed that. What were your other questions?
Yeah, so the other questions were tax relief, tax reduction for the impacted property.
That's right, no, we have not
Is
discussed
that
that.
under consideration?
No, it is not.
Yeah, we just changed some legislation recently, and to be very, very brief, we just changed some legislation recently about how people can control water on their property so it doesn't damage their neighbor's property, because someone in Newcastle, in the hamlet of Chappaqua, had their basement flooded repeatedly, but their neighbors were following the regulations, they were using their property as they had every right to do, and it was horrifically adversely affecting their neighbor's property, but didn't do anything to them. They probably actually had more value in their property. So there's no tax break for that person now that going forward, any person who wants to build or disturb the land is more limited because it protects their neighbor's property. They benefit because their neighbor can't do the same back to them. So I think, it seems like listening to everyone here that the sky is falling and it's anything but that. When we look at the legislation as it stands now and we look at the current regulations, we look at the history of how we change things with regularity. This happens with relative frequency across all municipalities. Things are changed. And this is not inconsistent with that, especially not inconsistent with what we see that's in the east of Hudson watershed. So I can only speak for myself. I don't think there's any tax break you're gonna get from this. Just like your neighbor in the hamlet of Chappaqua did not get a tax break because he or she cannot do the things he could have before that ultimately, unfortunately, one particular circumstance really horrifically flooded and damaged his neighbor's property repeatedly. So I think again, we'll try to answer some of these questions and make it more clear, but I also think we have to be very, very realistic and understand what this is and isn't, and we have to do a better job to make sure that you understand that as well. And I don't say that in a negative way, I mean that in a sincere way. We have to make sure it's clear what really is happening and what isn't.
No, I totally agree. Notification, clarity are some of the main issues that all of us have. But to use your example, well, if that was my property that was impacted by my neighbor, I have the option of suing them. Right, because that's between two homeowners. In this case, we're talking about the town making changes that substantially and materially impact a small subset of the town, right?
I'm gonna jump in for 1 second. I wasn't clear. That was for the entirety of the municipality. It wasn't just for the neighbors. It was a new legislation and change of the statutes that regulated. So no, that wasn't. This was just an example of how the neighbors impacted each other. But this is for the entire municipality. It wasn't between two parties. You certainly have a right to sue, but it was for the entire municipality.
Okay, be that as it may, the point I think you've heard repeatedly is that, and especially since we do not understand the full impact and the difference between what exists and what's being proposed, right? There's no real breakdown to that. The question remains, what is this impact going to be to our abilities to maintain and improve our properties and to the value of those properties? And nobody, obviously you guys don't have an answer to that, and I wouldn't expect you to at this meeting. But going back to the tax relief, I've actually, in fact, I live somewhere where that is part of the deal. If you live in a conservation zone, you get a tax rebate, right? There is an amount that is removed from your tax bill as part of the burden and the cost to, follow those regulations, keep keep the environment pristine, all that kind of stuff, follow the wetlands regulations. It's not unheard of, maybe it is in New York, but I guess my question is so if this all happens and all these homeowners, their properties or values are negatively impacted, then is the town just saying, hey, well, that's just too bad, it's just part of the regulations we passed. I think that is really not fair to consider the burden on these 102 property owners.
I think you're right that it's important for people to better understand what the regulations currently are to really understand the relative differences. So in any event, sorry to cut you short, we still have one other person here. We will not be considering reduction in taxes. Was there, did you have a third question?
So the last point was to provide that clarity and that breakdown of existing versus new proposed regulations.
Right, I think we should do that. I think we should do that even though it's clear to some, but it's obviously not clear to everyone. I think that would be very important. So we will attempt to make that clear.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Next is Joanne Landau. Joanne, you can go ahead if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. First, good evening at 10:08. Thanks everybody for their hard work, because I know it's late, so I will try and keep it short. So I am Joanne Landau, and I'm sort of a new purchaser, so contrary to most of the people who have spoken who are old timers, so to speak. So we just purchased on 2 Alapartis Circle, so we are the circle that is not yet included in the overlay. However, we are in the watershed, and so experienced just in the short 3 months that we lived in Newcastle, a variety of things, and I'll go into it in a second. But what I think you're hearing tonight, just kind of listening, because I keep hearing those on the board sort of saying, I'm not sure I really understand this. There's no difference, hardly any difference between this and existing code. What I think you're hearing is that people in this area feel that because of the nature of our properties, we already do a lot, and so and many times we're feeling like it's overload already. And now, it might just be 2 more things and it's not that much different, but it's sort of more and more. And I think what people are trying to say is, whoa, we kind of need, if anything, the direction to move back a little. Not just sort of this constant forward. And as one person said, searching for, a problem that doesn't exist is a bit strange. In terms of, just the one legal thing I'll say is that, a lot of people have alluded to it. I'm not a lawyer, but I certainly know a lot about it. And, there is some question here when one takes away something, what one gets on the other, on the taking thing. And, you just might want to think through it, because obviously as owners, we have to think through it. Like, what should be our next steps depending on circumstances? So you might not be prepared to do something, to give a tax benefit, as just was the recent answer. But, maybe when you find out that there are other circumstances, it might have to be something you need to consider if this is what you absolutely want.
I'm not sure I understand. Could you be clearer about what you're saying?
Yeah. Then in terms of sort of my story, just is a very silly little story, by mistake, because there was a misunderstanding. We cut down some trees. We gave money for the tree bank, and then we planted some grass on the suggestion of the folks in the department. And then it came back the suggestion, well, how about planting wildflowers? And I'm like, no, I can't plant wildflowers, because the lady who lived here before was a horticulturist and lived there for 40 years and has the most amazing flowers. They're just unbelievable. You would never want sort of wildflowers, which is why they're called wildflowers, to overgrow these things. And nobody has any bad intent in these kind of things. That's, totally understood. But it's just that I think people in these areas, it's very specific to the houses, the nature of the properties, and that's what I think you're sensing tonight. To have a sort of cookie cut overlay is a very difficult thing to do in these circumstances. So I hope you'll, consider all of these comments, and we look forward to working through it with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome to town.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else online. Is there anyone else online back there that you can see? No other hands are raised. Okay. All right, well, this will conclude the public hearing. There's one more hand.
I'll be very brief.
Okay. You can tell me your name and
My name is Marjorie Topman, Bruce Topman's wife. We've been
Can you spell that?
Newcastle,
Because we're
Topman, 78 Glendale Road.
okay.
We've been residents here since 1972. I have just really one comment. There seems to be an overlay of restrictions on all of our properties. I'm speaking of the 102 properties. We have people in our area who have 1 acre, a few acres, and others that have hundreds. And yet we are all, will be possibly upholden to regulations for everyone. My husband and I are 2 people. We travel at least 4 months of the year, and yet we are now required to have our septic tanks pumped every 3 years, whereas our septic people tell us every 4 to 5 years because of our usage. That's a blanket for everyone, and it's not just the septic system. It's all these other regulations. We all have different size properties. We feel, and you can hear, there's a lot of disgruntled here, and this all really started with Sunshine. We feel we have been neglected, and we have not been heard. And things have been forced upon us because we don't have the density that other people have in this community. And we do not feel heard, we do not feel cared about. Our road is the last road to be plowed during a snowstorm. When our electricity goes down, we are probably one of the last people because of our density. And I understand
I
part
live on
of
one
that.
of those roads
Okay.
in town.
Okay, I understand that. But I do feel that you have to understand that we are not heard. And it's very frustrating. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. All right, I think we have heard from everyone, and we do appreciate all of you coming out, and we are going to take these comments into serious consideration. We are getting written comments as well. We're going to keep we'll do this formally, but this is not the last public hearing on this matter. So we are going to, I wanna use the right words, we're not closing the public hearing, we are adjourning the public meeting until Tuesday, June 25th. So may I have a motion to do that, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. We will be sending out notices to all 100.
Hang on, everybody, wait,
We
what?
will be sending out notices to all 103 parcels. Just alerting you, reminding everybody when the adjournment is going to be, so that you have more time, and if you'd like, we're happy to put the legislation back in it. Just so if you didn't get a chance to take a look at it this time, you'll have it.
With the map, please, it's not clear in your
No.
last distribution that it was just 102, it made it sound like town-wide.
We can give the list.
Okay,
Okay, it's no, it's no.
so make that clearer and give them the map. Can that get sent out really soon?
We can't send it out sooner than tomorrow, I'm sorry.
Really? Okay, like
10/16.
yesterday?
No.
You can.
Yesterday.
Better we can do it, you can.
I know Lauren can, let's be honest.
Especially the difference between what we have now, which seems adequate.
We're going to work on that, yeah.
And as you mentioned, cite the code so we can go look up like the actual wording differences.
Okay.
Cite the existing
Yeah,
code.
that would be helpful. For those who don't hear, someone is suggesting that we cite the existing code, so yes, thank you. Okay.
Vicky, I mean, would it be reasonable to try to set up a Q&A session to get some basic questions answered by this folks? Okay.
Well, we can think of what the best way is to do something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe there's a better way, but we can talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Let me see.
You picked a
Still
fun
wanna
night to
take a
fill in
picture
for
for
me, no?
lunch?
What is it, you better be taking you for lunch tomorrow. Lobster,
I'm
steak.
I'm gonna text them right now and tell me.
Comments, are we up to?
He'll know.
Okay, we are up to the consent agenda, everybody. Holly, would you start with our consent agenda?
Jeremy style, Holly.
Jeremy style.
I move to adopt the items 1 through 7 is listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, we have to finish our meeting.
Give it a claims.
Okay, everyone, we're continuing our meeting, so
We're still here, we can't go home yet, please, let us move along.
there's a lot of talking.
I move to approve the payment of claims in the amount of $575,798.50 listed on the summary pre-check writing report, detail voucher, detail report on June 7, 2024. Checks will be printed and distributed each claim listed on Wednesday, June 12, 2024.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. I move,
Did you
make the fo-
have order?
I thought we weren't doing that.
No, we don't need.
We are? Okay.
But I'm gonna vote no and I would like to explain myself.
I move to make the following resolution, I move to adopt the following resolution, pardon me. Now therefore it be resolved, alright? Missing something?
Yeah, it seems like there's a beginning part of that one missing.
Now therefore be resolved, the town board hereby establishes a committee on inclusion and belonging, which shall be comprised of up to 9 members to serve in staggered terms as follows. Pat Pollock and Michelle Seligman, 2 years each, effective June 12th this year to June 11th, 2026. Rayut Tarandashali Batarahari, and I apologize if I'm really not doing well on your name, I'm sorry. Tara Ramirez, Rhonda Sauerborn, the prior, Rhonda is 2 years effective June 12, 2024, like the earlier two I mentioned, and then 3-year terms for the others effective June 12, 2024 to June 11, 2027.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we're gonna have a little discussion first before voting. First, the differences in years are just because we want the members to be staggered, so people don't end their terms all at the same time.
Okay. Very briefly, I know we're here late and I apologize. I just wanted to say, I spent a great deal of time this weekend thinking about my role on the town board and came to the realization that on this matter, I might stand alone. The 5 of us are by no means required to agree all the time, and I think this should be encouraged and respected, especially as we embrace viewpoint diversity, transparency, and working together through disagreement, which I think we do an excellent job of actually. While I very much appreciate our residents' willingness to volunteer for this committee and their desire to bring people together, I am voting no.
After the inauguration, a decision was made to rebrand the CREI and create a new committee that focused on inclusion and belonging. I do think this is a positive step away from the controversial past of the CREI, and I think more emphasis should be placed on fun cultural events that bring our community together. But I am not convinced this iteration is the way to achieve that goal. The town did post the application and we interviewed some of the residents that applied. Later this winter, the board was informed that there had been several meetings with residents that might be a good fit for this new committee. I know this took a lot of effort, but I was uncomfortable with the way that it was organized. I voiced my concerns and we moved on. Some weeks later, the town board was provided with a list of names for the new committee, and once again, I voiced my concerns. I am troubled by connections to and support of Westpac, and I believe that public comments have been made that are disqualifying. Additionally, our last CREI committee created unnecessary tension culminating in mass resignations because they wouldn't condemn anti-Semitism after October 7th. If we are going forward with a new committee aimed at fostering belonging and inclusion, we should start fresh. New mission statement, new board, new goals and new objectives, and there should be ideological diversity among the members, not just as it pertains to the Israel-Hamas war. I do not support reconstituting this committee right now as is. I think this mission statement is vague, as are the goals and objectives. Without understanding what the expectations, limits, and boundaries of this new committee will be, it falls short of providing me the necessary clarity to feel comfortable adopting its resolution. Ensuring the right balance on this committee is critical to its success. If it has been hard to find residents that want to volunteer, maybe now is not the right time for its formation. There are many other organized groups in town that can assist in planning cultural community events that don't carry the stigma and controversy associated with this one. And I just want to thank my town board members for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. We had conversations and everyone has been very respectful and I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to make any comments?
I just want to say that I'm very happy that these 6 individuals have stepped forward and offered themselves and their expertise to our town. A town that sometimes can feel more divided than it has for me, living here over 20 years. I think the time is now to seat this committee and to rely on the expertise of these 6 people who, over the years that they've lived here, have had each of them a huge impact on the people around them, and have offered themselves in very generous ways. And they are continuing to do that for our town. So I'm thrilled that they're willing to do that, and I think that they will, having spoken to them at length, really offer a warm, embracing, understanding, tolerant approach to the residents of Newcastle. So I thank them.
Now I feel compelled. If 2 of you have spoken, I'll briefly share my views. I did share some trepidation and concerns about this committee. That being said, it's I think my role as a legislator to not always agree with people who might be in a committee, whether that's 1, 2, 3 or more, but to find ways in a committee like this, especially at a time when the divisiveness and people backed into their own respective corners that I may very well disagree with another side wholeheartedly, is the time to try to talk and figure things out. If I wanted to just have an echo chamber, that's pretty easy to do, but that's not my job. My job is to try to facilitate, even if I disagree, conversations so that we can be in a better place, whatever that is, and it certainly can be better than it is now. So an imperfect world, an imperfect solution, but I think this is the right way to move forward in the healthiest way possible. Otherwise, we're going to just sink in our own muck and not find ways to work out whatever it may be, which is well beyond Israel and Hamas. We have other issues that impact adversely and affect all our communities, and this is a way to embrace the better and the good, to find the right way forward.
Holly, would you like to make a comment? I don't mean to single anyone out. You don't have to by any means.
I am very appreciative to the folks who are willing to be on this committee for their willingness to work with folks that they know they may not get along with for the betterment of our community. So I am extremely grateful, and I very much hope that this committee can erase all of the baggage, you might say, that some of the previous iterations may have had. So I'm very optimistic and very grateful.
Yeah, and I guess I might as well add, I did allude to this at the beginning of the meeting, I was probably pretty abstract about it. But you know, we've had really challenging, awful geopolitical issues going on in the Middle East that have really roiled communities, and it certainly has had an impact here. And it has caused rifts and division here. And if I see people who are on polar opposite sides of this issue tell us that they want to work together, the way I look at it is, who are we to stand in their way? If these are people who would normally be on opposite sides of a war, isn't that what we want? We want these different peoples who are at war with each other to work and live together. So if there are people in our community representing that who are telling us they want to work together, I'm not going to get in their way. And I think we need to be a little bit courageous. We're only human, so yes, we could fail spectacularly. But should we be afraid of that? I say no. And it is time to allow people to work together and to come together. That's my view. I respect everybody on this board. I do respect, Ally, I respect your feelings. I understand them. And it's okay. It really is. I think that, I hope that all of the fears and trepidation that is out there will be alleviated. I mean, these are people who really do want to work together. So I say let's give it a chance and vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
One nay. Okay, very well. Thank you, everybody.
Go ahead.
So Jen, you wanna?
I move to accept the retirement of Patricia Cartuccio Mingione from the position of Senior Office Assistant Office Manager within the Comptroller Department effective June 29th, 2024. The town would like to thank Patty for her 20 years of dedicated service.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Holly, second.
Second? Awesome.
Go out of order.
Sorry, I was waiting for it, I'm eager.
I
Okay,
said second.
okay, all in favor, please say aye.
I move to authorize the reappointment of the following individuals to the Climate Smart Communities Task Force for a 2-year term effective April 13th, 2023 to April 12th, 2025. See names below.
Second.
All in favor?
Look at you.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm proud of me.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go?
Ally, you haven't gone yet
You got
because
it.
Jeremy stepped in out of order.
Thanks, Jeremy.
You're up to 5.
I move to accept the resignation of Andrea Meekum as co-chair of the Airport Advisory Board effective June 5th, 2024. The town would like to thank Andrea for her service.
Thank you and second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I move to appoint James Benton as co-chair of the Airport Advisory Board for the remainder of his term effective through February 13th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And thank you for stepping up.
And I move to authorize the extension of the term limit of work for Matthew Hernandez as social media coordinator for a period of 13 weeks from June 10th through September 13th, 2024 for a total stipend amount of $4,060.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Holly.
Holly, you wanna take over?
I move to accept the proposal from Marist Toll for a community-wide survey regarding the use of land surrounding the Chapua train station not to exceed the amount of $68,800.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to appoint Lori Morton as chair of the Beautification Advisory Board for the remainder of her 3-year term effective through August 31st, 2026.
Wait, October?
October 31st, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
She's doing a great job.
Yes, thank you.
Do you want me to
who
go?
wants to go? Jeremy, do you wanna?
Alright, I move to authorize extension of employment for DeSabra Owen McPhee Dejan, who serves as a student intern with the engineering department for an additional 18 days with a total amount of $1,200 effective through July 26, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
I move
Just one more.
I move to authorize the hiring of the following individuals to serve as recreation attendants within the Recreation and Parks Department to serve as the 2024 camp staff as listed below.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, may I have a motion to, hang on, what?
It's from our executive session.
I thought we weren't going to.
Can I see what that is? Sorry. Okay. Okay.
Alright, yes, I move to accept the probation failure termination of employee number 3069, motor equipment operator within the Department of Public Works effective June 21st, 2024, close of business.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and now, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Sorry, just one more of the chargers. We can just get a motion to approve, to accept the proposal from INF.
Oh, we did not get that, the chargers.
Amsterdam and
Oh
Gedney.
gosh,
The
sorry.
Amsterdam.
Thank you, Lauren.
So may I have a motion to approve the chargers
For Amsterdam.
as discussed in the Amsterdam Park and at Gedney Park.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Lauren.
I hope that was
Good catch, Lauren.
sufficient and form.
I move to applaud Lauren for her good catch. Lauren, second. All in favor?
Well done.
Okay, so now we move to adjourn.
Did we got a motion to adjourn?
So
And a second?
moved.
Oh.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are
We have to
adjourned,
take a
thank
picture.
you
Do you
and
want us
good
to take
night.
a picture?